Chapter 1127. With that, Wu Qi's test of his current strength came to an end. At the same time, the other people's crazy cultivation in the past few years came to an abrupt halt. In Audiobook's words, when he cultivated to the peak level of the Tao-breaking realm, he was very happy. It was like a man who had climbed to the top of a mountain after a long and arduous trek, surrounded by boundless scenery. But when Wu Qi suddenly broke through the realm of Tao-breaking, it was like Audiobook was standing on the top of a mountain 100 miles high and was enjoying the scenery, when a mountain 10,000 miles high suddenly appeared not far away in front of him. Wu Qi's breakthrough was a great blow to everyone, and it made Princess Zhonglu and the others temporarily lose the motivation to continue cultivating. But the past few years had also brought them great benefits. Wu Qi's current realm was unknown, while Princess Zhonglu, Yixia, and Audiobook had all firmly possessed the power of peak-level Tao-breaking realm. In particular, their magic power was more than 10,000 times stronger than a few years ago. Now, even if they were to face the top revered ones and sect masters of the Buddhist League and Tao League, they would not be afraid of them, be it in terms of divine abilities, magic power, or pure magic power. Moreover, each of Princess Zhonglu and the others had condensed extremely powerful magical treasures, which had gone beyond the scope of ordinary supreme artifacts of primal. If any almighty experts of the Buddhist League or Tao League dared to cause trouble in front of them, they would definitely be courting death. As for Lord Xianxing, Catfish, and the others, including Tu Xiaobai, who had the weakest cultivation base, had all broken through the realm of Tao breaking. Lord Xianxing and Catfish, who had been taught by Audiobook the mystic arts of Zulong, had even reached the first tier of Tao breaking realm. Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather, the 4 dragon pythons of fire and ice, had the mystic arts and divine abilities passed down in their bloodlines, and their cultivation bases were not weaker than Lord Xianxing and Catfish. In contrast, Tu Xiaobai and Yuan Qing, the 2 demon immortal disciples Wu Qi had deliberately kept by his side, were the weakest, but they were also extraordinary. The 7-colored divine lotus was a heaven-defying cheat. With it to improve their magic power, Wu Qi and the others had gained great benefits. On the 3rd day after Wu Qi and Audiobook had fought, they had carefully explored every corner of the ruin, then gathered in the center of the ruins, the tallest and grandest great hall. With a wave of his hand, a waterfall of light, about 1,000 feet in circumference, appeared out of thin air. The panoramic view of the ruin was displayed in the waterfall, and everyone could see a ball of very strong light flickering right under the great palace where they had stopped. Wu Qi pointed his finger at the ball of light, and it spread out abruptly. The panoramic map of the ruins vanished, and a huge stone chamber, about 100 miles in circumference, emerged amidst the waterfall of light. Over the past 3 days, Wu Qi had thoroughly explored the inside and outside of the ruin with his divine sense. There was nothing of value left in the ruin, including spirit pills, spirit herbs, magical treasures, and the like. The only thing worth noting was the strange stone chamber under the great hall. All the mysteries of the ruin should be in this chamber. In the center of the chamber was a huge pool, about 40 miles in circumference and about a mile deep. Now, there was only a shallow layer of water, about 10 feet deep, rocking and swaying in the vast pond. The surface of the water glinted with a gleam that looked like diamond dust, and it looked a little like the strange and unknown force in Wu Qi's body. Besides, Wu Qi noticed that as long as the people in the ruin activated their spirit power and created something, the ripples in the pool would be lowered by a level. If it was an ordinary fruit, the water in the pool wouldn't be consumed at all, but if it was a chaos supreme treasure like the heaven-smelting cauldron, the ripples would be lowered significantly. After a few attempts, Wu Qi finally confirmed that this pool was the key reason why the ruin was so magical. The ruin itself was nothing special, except for the materials used to build it, which couldn't be found in Pangu world. Nevertheless, these rare materials weren't valuable either. They were only beautiful and bright, and could contain all kinds of natural powers. These materials were naturally excellent for building caves, palaces, and mansions, but apart from that, they didn't have any other uses. In the stone chamber under the hall, a large number of transparent crystal pipes connected every corner of the ruin, and were thickly covered in all kinds of spell symbols. Wu Qi tried in every corner of the ruin. Whenever he thought of something in his mind, a certain amount of water would surge out of the pool through the pipes and quickly reach to Wu Qi. Ji Hao told the others about his discovery. Curiously, they all reached their spirit powers down into the hall. Nevertheless, their spirit powers were way weaker than Wu Qi's. Except for Princess Zhonglu, who could barely sense a scorching hot and tremendous sphere of power down in the hall, the others couldn't sense anything at all. Cao Buzan began to grumble, "This is strange. The bottom of this great hall is made of solid rocks. How can there be any stone chamber?" Shaking his head, Wu Qi waved his hand towards the floor of the hall, and a piece of floor tens of feet in circumference disappeared. Then, Wu Qi pointed his finger out and opened up a tens of thousands of miles deep path in the hall. Bringing the others, Wu Qi rode a cloud into the path and descended all the way down. Not long after that, a bright light shone out from down below. They had arrived at the stone chamber. It was 100 miles wide stone chamber. The walls, floor, and ceiling were densely covered with countless spell symbols. Some of them were exactly the same as the 360 spell symbols that Wu Qi had studied thoroughly, but there were also some that he had never seen before. Wu Qi memorized these spell symbols that he had never seen before. Meanwhile, Aobuzan had long leaped to the side of the pool and reached out his hand curiously. Suddenly, a large hand made of dark mist reached out and grabbed at the ripples in the pool. Aobuzan just wanted to get some samples of the water in the pool to see what was new. But a bright light flashed on the surrounding walls, and a thunderbolt struck down from the sky. Aobuzan howled miserably as he was knocked flying tens of miles away by the thunderbolt. In a haste, 3 layers of thick dragon scales emerged on Aobuzan's body to protect his vital parts. But the power of the thunderbolt was ridiculously strong. It shattered all 3 layers of dragon scales, and half of his body was cooked by the thunderbolt. The group of people stared at Aobuzan, who struggled to his feet from the ground in a sorry state. Although this fellow was bold and reckless, his life was extremely tough. His body was scorched black, about an inch thick of skin and flesh had been burned to ashes by the thunderbolt, and most of his upper body was roasted into cooked meat. But he was still alive. Catfish Flood Dragon murmured to herself, "A scourge can live for 10,000 years, this saying is true. If I were to suffer such a strike." She shuddered violently, as she dared not to imagine what it would be like if half of her body was roasted. Don't let the fertile water flow to outsiders. With his whole body emanating the aroma of roasted meat, Aobuzan grabbed the roasted dragon meat off his body and swallowed it in big mouthfuls. The ferocious scene made Wu Qi turn his head away. Who had ever seen such a ferocious man who could swallow his own meat without batting an eyelid? It was true that this perverted dragon was a little outrageous, but he was indeed a great scourge in the primitive universe. Very few people under the heaven could compare with him in terms of his ferociousness. After swallowing all the roasted dragon meat, Aobuzan threw his head back and let out a long and sonorous cry. A strong dark mist rolled out of his body, and his flesh and blood began to grow back quickly. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, his wounds were fully healed. He spat on the ground in a sorry state, clenched his teeth and yelled at Wu Qi, "The master of this place is so stingy. I just wanted to see what is in this pool." How could he be so stingy? Before Aobuzan's voice could fade away, the whole ruin shook violently again. Everyone understood that the strong light coming from down below had once again slammed into the ruin. Over the past few years, they had been meditating in different halls of the ruin, and did not notice anything strange after the strong light crashed into the ruin. But today, standing beside the pool, they could clearly see that as the strong light crashed into the ruin, countless tiny transparent transistors in the stone chamber burst into a blinding light at the same time. Tens of thousands of transistors, each as tiny as a hair, sprayed out a sticky liquid that looked like crushed diamond dust, pouring into the pool amidst a pleasant tinkling noise. When the strong light crashed into the ruin, the water in the pool, which was originally about 10 feet deep, suddenly increased to about 30 feet deep. Obviously, if no one consumed a lot of energy, the pool would be filled up in less than a year. Looking at the gradually rising water in the pool, Wu Qi nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, "It seems that the restrictive spell in this ruin is not as simple as it looks. If this ruin is not disintegrating, it seems that the water in this pool can constantly replenish itself." After pondering for a moment, Princess Zhonglu said with a smile, "If this is the case, doesn't it mean that as long as the ruin is not destroyed, the energy in this pool will never be exhausted?" Everyone's eyes lit up. If they could take this pool, wouldn't they be able to obtain endless benefits? Wu Qi looked around, then nodded to the crowd with a smile and said, "I'm afraid we can't restore the restrictive spell here. If we want to take it, we'll have to take the whole ruin with us. Besides, this pool is only a container to store the magical energy. The truly powerful treasure is the tool that can constantly replenish the energy in the pool. Let's find a way to take this ruin first, then go down and see what kind of rare treasure has such power." Everyone praised in unison. Wu Qi looked at the pool and frowned. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the pool. Everyone was shocked, but then they saw a huge hand, which was made of a strong light that looked like the powder of shattered stars, shoot out of Wu Qi's palm and reach the surface of the water in a flash, grabbing a fist-sized water droplet with ease. This time, the restrictive spell in the surroundings did not react at all. The group of people who were shocked just now all breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. Wu Qi grabbed the water droplet and played with it for a while, then opened his mouth and swallowed it. That's right, it was the same as the strange and brand new energy in Wu Qi's body, but it was not as pure as the energy in Wu Qi's body. If the energy in Wu Qi's body was alcohol, then the water in this pool was at most 30 degrees white wine. After looking thoughtfully at the restrictive spell around the stone chamber for a while, Wu Qi said with a smile, "Come, let's think of a way to take this ruin, lest it slowly disintegrates here. What a waste of God's gift." The group of people laughed in unison, then rode their clouds and rushed out of the tunnel. Chapter 11:28. Everyone stood in the chaotic void, looking at the relic in the distance, which was over 10 million miles in both length and width. The huge ruins were collapsing from the corners, collapsing at an extremely slow pace. It was like an old man with one foot in the grave. The life force of this relic was slowly fading away. Wu Qi stood right above the relic, wrapped up the entire relic with his spiritual sense, and slowly reached out his hands towards the relic. Wu Qi's body suddenly swayed. With his current strength, he could play with the sun, moon, and stars like they were marbles. However, although the size of this relic was not as big as many slightly bigger stars, its weight was really amazing. Especially when Wu Qi touched the relic, the originally ordinary-looking palaces suddenly flashed with a large number of runic lights, and a counterforce, which almost suffocated Wu Qi, roared towards him. Holding his breath, Wu Qi tried his best to resist the impact of the invisible energy, which came like a landslide or a tsunami. His clothes were ripped to shreds by the invisible force. Blue veins bulged all over his body, and all his magic powers surged out, forcibly dragging the relic towards the spirit space inside his body. Along with an ear-piercing explosion, clear cracks appeared all over the relic. Obviously, the relic's body couldn't bear the tremendous force exerted by Wu Qi. The runic lights flashing on the palaces burst out with a strong light at the same time, which shook Wu Qi and made him vomit blood. Then, these runic lights dimmed down at the same time. Wu Qi breathed a sigh of relief. It was done. The defensive mechanism of this relic was really powerful. If the relic was still in its original state, he wouldn't have dared to collect it so rashly. However, the relic, which was on the verge of collapse, couldn't resist Wu Qi's collection and was obediently put into his pocket. Smoke and fire erupted from every corner of the relic, and the relic, which was tens of thousands of miles in length and width and tens of thousands of miles in thickness, was slowly pulled into the world inside Wu Qi's body. The heaven-refining cauldron, which had been gradually refined by Wu Qi over the past few years, smashed into the core of the relic under Wu Qi's control, releasing an immeasurable power to suppress the relic, which was on the verge of collapse. The Yuan Ling True Flame with an astonishingly high temperature swept across the entire area, melting the cracks all over the ruins and forcibly repairing the ruins once again. As soon as the relic entered Wu Qi's body, it began to slowly absorb Wu Qi's magic power. It gave Wu Qi the feeling of a withered seedling that was about to die being put back into a fertile paddy field. This ruin actually gave off an aura similar to that of a living creature, desperately absorbing the energy that could save its life. As Wu Qi's magic power continued to fuse into the ruins, the crumbling areas at the edges gradually stopped. Instead, some of the palaces at the edges, which had already cracked, gradually recovered to their original state. Seeing that the relic was going well, Wu Qi laughed delightfully. He gave a resonant shout and waved to Princess Zhonglu and the others, who had been watching from a distance away. Then they transformed into streams of light and flew downwards. Moving down through the dark, spiral-shaped cracks, Wu Qi collected all broken bricks and tiles on his way. These bricks and tiles all fell from the collapsed ruins, and after Wu Qi took them back, these bricks and tiles began to merge back into the ruins. Moving down through the dark, spiral-shaped cracks, Wu Qi collected all broken bricks and tiles. These bricks and tiles fell from the collapsed ruins, and after Wu Qi took them back, these bricks and tiles began to merge back into the ruins. With his current power, Wu Qi could teleport himself to a distance of nearly 100 galaxies in Pangu world within a single flash. That ball of white light was very soft. It was a kind of weak softness. The flickering light was like a beating heart. It gave people the feeling that this ball of white light was alive. But at this moment, Flash was very weak, like a burly man whose body had been pierced with 70 or 80 transparent holes. At this moment, he was only relying on his tyrannical vitality to struggle at death's door. But at the moment, it was very weak, like a muscular man, whose body was punctured by 70 to 80 holes, struggling to survive with its strong life force. The white light was the end of the black spiral gap. It was slowly sinking down like a drowning corpse into the endless abyss of the sea. The white light was the end of this black spiral-shaped crack. It had been spinning down slowly, sinking into the bottomless ocean like a drowning corpse. The white light sparkled from time to time. Sometimes, it was strong, sometimes weak, as if it could die out at any time. However, according to Wu Qi's spirit power, the chaos power seemed to have lost some of its purest energy after swirling in the white light. Although the amount was not much, the purest part of the chaos power was indeed absorbed by the white light. Just like a sugarcane that was put into a juicer, the sweet sugarcane juice was left behind, while the dregs were sprayed out. While Ji Hao was looking at this sphere of white light, he heard a muffled buzzing noise. Next, a dazzling sphere of light spurted out from this sphere of white light, swiftly rising into the air through that spiral-shaped slit. Along the way, Wu Qi and the others had seen tens of such bright lights. Sure enough, it was the treasure shrouded in this white light that was replenishing the energy in the pool in the ruin. Wu Qi signaled the others to stay far away from the white light, while he himself carefully formed a hand seal, which could be used to activate an escape art at any time, and cautiously approached the white light. After circling around the white light, which was about 10,000 feet in diameter, Wu Qi was shocked to find that neither his primordial Dharma eyes nor his spirit power could see through this white light, and he had no idea what was inside it. It was a very exquisite and powerful restrictive spell, and the thing inside the white light was very powerful. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi covered his left hand with a faint magical power that looked like diamond dust, then carefully pressed it towards the white light. Before Princess Zhonglu, who was standing behind Wu Qi, could say, "Watch out," she saw the spot where Wu Qi's palm met the white light suddenly burst out with a blinding light. The white light disappeared without a trace, and in its place, a magical item with an extremely beautiful design, so splendid that it could not be described with words. This magical item was divided into two parts. The top part was a beautiful, slim-necked bottle. The bottle was about 1,000 feet tall, and its entire body was transparent, without any impurities. It was a very clear bottle, without any mixed colors, yet it seemed to contain all the colors in the world. It was an indescribable beauty, and yet, it was a luster that could almost immerse one's divine soul into it. Soft and clear, a faint light was slowly lingering on the bottle. If one carefully stared at the bottle, which seemed to be thousands of times thinner than the wings of a cicada, one would find mountains, rivers, the sun, the moon, and stars in the faint, rotating light pattern. It seemed to contain everything in the world, but at the same time, it seemed to contain nothing at all. Below the bottle, the lower part of this magical item, was a magnificent lotus throne. Countless layers of lotus petals spread out in a comfortable manner. Every single lotus petal was bent into a beautiful, soul-stirring arc. All the lotus petals gave people a feeling that they were wholeheartedly guarding the bottle above them. Streams of clear light slowly spread out from the petals, while the chaos power was constantly absorbed by these petals. The essence of the chaos power was purified and gradually merged into the bottle above the lotus throne. The bottle and the lotus throne were integrated into one. The huge lotus throne and the bottle did not have the slightest impurities. The lotus throne supported the bottle and rotated extremely slowly. When the other side of the bottle was turned towards Wu Qi, everyone saw the two characters that no one could understand on the bottle. The two characters were faintly floating in the bottle. The characters were twisted like earthworms, and the strokes were so complicated that people did not know how to identify them. At first glance, the two characters seemed to be scribbled messily, with 7 or 8 twisted strokes. Looking at it carefully for a second time, the characters seemed to have more than 10 strokes, looking a little magnificent and simple. The more he looked at them, the more he felt they were extremely complicated. In the end, even Wu Qi felt like stars were flashing before his eyes. It was as if these two characters were formed by several tens of thousands of strokes. They were not just two characters, but two enormous runes, two three-dimensional formations formed by countless mysterious and indescribable runes. Wu Qi had the strongest spirit power, so he saw the most things from the two characters. He was also the first one to vomit blood. Then, Princess Zhongli, Xia, Ao Buzan, and the others. Everyone who had been staring at the two characters for a long while vomited blood. Even Ninetails, who was only interested in food, stared at the two characters for quite a while, then vomited a mouthful of green blood to over 10 miles away. It was only 2 words, but it had made Wu Qi and his companions, who were considered the strongest experts in Pangu world, cough blood together. These 2 words were truly miraculous. Ordinary words could not describe their existence at all. Characters from the holy world? Wu Qi gave a bitter smile, then turned around and gave a long sigh to the others and said, "It seems that this is the name of this treasure. But these 2 characters from the holy world have actually made us vomit blood. How powerful is the holy world? How powerful are the people living in the holy world?" The others all shook their heads. Chi-Chi sighed as well. It was just an inscription on a magical item. Fortunately, Wu Qi had just given them a big blow. Therefore, when facing such a blow, their mental endurance was still pretty good. He breathed out a long sigh. Carefully, he filled his palm with energy, then quietly pressed it onto the extraordinarily beautiful magical item. The enormous treasure quaked slightly like a living creature. Then a satisfied sigh came from the core of the treasure. Just like in the ruins, this treasure began absorbing the power provided by Wu Qi. The feeling of weakness that Wu Qi felt when he could die at any time gradually disappeared, and the treasure suddenly came back to life. Wu Qi pressed his palm tightly against the magical item. He could feel a subtle ripple of energy flowing into his body from the magical item, as if it was trying to find out how strong he was. After a whole 3 days and 3 nights, a helpless sigh came from the core of the treasure. Suddenly, Wu Qi understood the sigh of the treasure. When a dragon is trapped in the shallows, it will be played by a shrimp. All right, I will do as you wish today." Wu Qi was infuriated by the message sent by this magical item. What was the meaning of this? Are you a dragon? Am I a shrimp? However, he didn't have the energy to think too much, because the tide-like information surged into his soul. This splendidly shaped treasure was named Spirit Gatherer. It was the greatest treasure of a small sect in the holy world, a real holy treasure. It had witnessed the destruction of the sacred world with its own eyes. Chapter 1129. Right at this moment, the World Breaker showed up. This was what Ling Ju remembered, the cause and effect of the destruction of the Holy World. In the Holy World, there was no complicated classification of power, like in Pangu World. Over there were only 4 grades. In Wu Chi's spiritual ocean, countless lights and shadows sparkled, and a great deal of information emerged. That was everything Ling Ju knew about the Holy World. Those powerful beings in the Holy World created countless worlds. Perhaps, in a piece of sand on the roadside, a world created by an unknown powerful being was hidden, and countless living beings lived freely in that world. They also created countless strange species. The number of living beings in the Holy World was at least hundreds of millions of times greater than that in Pangu World. Because there were too many powerful beings who were extremely bored, they even used the species they created to make all kinds of bets. Therefore, more and more living beings were created by them. Finally, someone began to notice that something was not right. The 7 mighty experts gathered together and combed through the tragic war that had lasted for dozens of eons, and were shocked to find that there seemed to be someone manipulating everything behind the scenes. Just as they were carefully investigating, the culprit who had triggered the war, Huan Yen, was finally forced to reveal her true face. What surprised Zhu Ling the most was that the founding disciples of the Blue Nightmare Palace often went to battle in groups. However, only those who went to battle rarely returned. Occasionally, 2 or 3 of them would return, but they were the unlucky ones who had been forced back to the mortal level from the original level, without an arm or a leg. In the Holy World, any original level disciple was qualified to establish his own sect, his own force. Then a plague spread everywhere, and the horrible plague spread across the entire Holy World. Not only the mortals, even the original level and the spirit ancestors suffered a mental breakdown and died after being infected by the plague. At last, the plague even spread to the saints. At last, the plague mutated and recombined, and even the most powerful beings could not withstand it, and their powers were greatly weakened. Later, Ling Ju heard that a great war broke out among the hundreds of most powerful saints in the Holy World, and the war directly involved the 7 most powerful beings. Later, the 7 most powerful beings joined the 3 sides of the war, and the flames of war swept across the entire Holy World. The spirit ancestor had relied on spirit gathering to establish that ruin and establish a faction. The spirit gathering artifact had always been stored in the ruins that had originally been called the Blue Nightmare Palace, but it was still a powerful sacred artifact personally crafted by the sage. His spiritual will had always been paying attention to all sorts of changes in the vicinity of the Blue Nightmare Palace. To his surprise, he discovered that the origin energy of the saints' world was growing weaker and weaker. The life force of the various living beings in the saints' world was growing weaker and weaker. In the Blue Nightmare Palace where spirit gathering was located, the Spirit Alpha, who created the Holy World's blue lynx and thousands of other cold-blooded crawling creatures, was summoned to kill world breakers at the last moment. Before he left, the ancestors sealed up the entire Blue Nightmare Palace. He even went as far as to use up the origin energy of spirit gathering to seal the entire Blue Nightmare Palace into a spatial crack at the edge of the saints' world. It was an indescribable world. Just like Pangu had said, the true experts of the saints' world all had the great power to create something from nothing and achieve anything they wanted. They could create a world as they pleased. With a thought, they could create countless stars in space. With a thought, they could destroy trillions of star systems. Their spiritual seas formed an ocean, and the world was like a boat floating on this ocean. Everything depended on their spirits to exist. The collapse of the saints' world lasted for a whole aeon. Then, everything turned to nothing. After all the disciples of the Blue Nightmare Palace left for war, tens of thousands of years later, the saints' world collapsed. Spirit gathering clearly remembered the terrifying scene of the saints' world sky disappearing piece by piece, the ground disappearing piece by piece, and all living beings howling as they were sucked into the chaos. Spirit gathering was a sacred artifact. It was a sacred artifact that had luckily survived the destruction of the saints' world. Even more powerful existences could create all sorts of human-like races and powerful beings like dragons and divine beasts. They were called the Spirit Alpha. In other words, they had the right to create all sorts of powerful races that could reproduce and develop for a long time. They were the ancestors of all living beings. However, a sacred artifact like spirit gathering could grant even an ordinary human being the power to achieve anything he wanted. Even in the saints' world, a sacred artifact like this was rarely seen. Spirit gathering was one of the hundreds of most powerful saints in the saints' world. But because of something, this saint owed a Spirit Alpha a favor, and therefore he gave spirit gathering to this Spirit Alpha. The war went on. 1 year, 2 years, 1 yuan hui, 2 yuan hui, 1 cultivation tribulation, 2 cultivation tribulations. To be exact, how long had the saints' world existed? Even those top-grade powerful beings in the saints' world didn't want to waste time on this question. By now, Pangu world had existed for nearly 1 million cultivation tribulations. However, in the eyes of those powerful beings in the saints' world, this long period of time was nothing more than a blink of an eye. Slightly more powerful beings were the ones like Wu Qi, who had formed the most important power in the saints' world, the holy power. They were called the originators. They could create flowers, birds, insects, fishes, and all kinds of ordinary weapons, but they couldn't bring too great a change to the world. In the saints' world, everything existed in reality, and everything was illusory. Unlike Pangu world, everything in Pangu world was constant and followed a certain pattern, while the great Tao of nature was orderly and stable. But in the saints' world, the rules could be changed, the great Tao could be broken, and the great Tao could be trampled on. In the saints' world, in some places, only men could get pregnant, and women could be strong and combative. Perhaps, in some places, human beings had their feet rooted on the ground, while flowers, grasses, and trees were as lively as the people in Pangu world. More likely, one could see countless enormous, transparent jellyfish slowly swimming in the sky. The ocean was in the sky, and the ocean formed the sky of that world. All other terrestrial creatures had to carefully live under the ocean, which wasn't very high. Beings of this level were indeed the most powerful beings in the saints' world, but among them, there were also 7 who were the most powerful. They were the 7 supreme experts of the saints' world, the 7 most powerful saints. The 7 supreme races they created were also the 7 most powerful organizations in the saints' world. Only when all the other races in the saints' world worked together could they fend off the 7 terrifying races. Then, they gathered the power of the entire saints' world to hunt the world breakers. However, the world breakers had strange powers, and they had all kinds of strange tricks. The saints' world could not kill them, and instead, the world breakers' world was about to collapse. The sky fell and the earth cracked. Everything was destroyed. A rain of blood fell from the sky, and fire rose from the ground. As a result, the cultivation of the disciples of the Spirit Ancestor progressed at a tremendous pace. After an unknown number of years, the disciples of the Spirit Ancestor produced a large number of original creations one after another. In the saints' world, the originators were the backbone of a sect. The number of originators determined the true power of a sect. The disciples worked hard, and the power of the sect grew. The Spirit Ancestor was about to break through the bottleneck and become a real saint. The lowest level of existence was a normal creature that did not have the ability to create something out of nothing. It did not matter if they were weak like mortals or had the power of a Deluo Jin Xian. As long as they did not have the ability to create something out of nothing, they were called ordinary. They were the ordinary people of the saints' world. They were like ants in the mud. They could only rely on powerful beings to survive. A vast amount of information flowed into Wu Qi's soul. The huge amount of information almost made Wu Qi's soul explode. This was all the information Spirit Ancestor had seen and heard in the saints' world for countless years. How long had Spirit Ancestor existed in the saints' world? Even Spirit Ancestor himself had forgotten this number. He could see the fire burning in the water. He could see the fish dancing in the fire. He could see the races that were born against the flow of time. In those races, babies were the fathers of adults, and old women called babies ancestors. You could even see the star dancing in the sky like a happy little bee. The light emitted by the star was not warm, but bone-chilling. From time to time, it would even erupt a few ice storms, freezing the nearby planets into ice lumps. There were very few existences of the highest level in the Saints' world. In the vast Saints' world, there were probably only a few hundred of them. They had the ability to create anything and destroy everything with a single thought. Even saints like the Spirit Ancestor and the Originator could be created and destroyed with a single thought. Terrifying existences like that were the true saints of the Saints' world. Normally, they would have a powerful, symbolic race. This race would definitely be the most perfect, most powerful creature that they had personally created. They would often refer to themselves with the name of this race. No one knew how the battle broke out. It was as if hundreds of trusted disciples of the saints had suddenly started killing each other. Moreover, they had attacked each other without any reason. Many people were completely annihilated, thus triggering a large-scale chaotic battle. When the 7 elites were involved in the fight, the war was out of control. After Huan Yen appeared, the other 12 world breakers appeared. Even the weakest of them, Thousand Head, had become very strong after absorbing the flesh of countless creatures that had died. He was not as strong as the 7 elites, but he was not far off. In the beginning, the war was only between the races created by the saints and the 7 elites. Later, they joined the fight. The 7 elites killed each other and destroyed half of the saints' world. The surging spirit tide destroyed 90% of the worlds in the saints' world. Some unknown elites that had been living in seclusion since ancient times appeared. They were angry that the world they had worked so hard to create had been destroyed, so they joined the fight. Spirit Ancestor had the power to create things out of thin air, but if Spirit Ancestor used his god powers to create things out of thin air, it would cost him his original holy power. With Gather Spirit, Spirit Ancestor did not need to do it himself. If his students lacked something while they were practicing, they could just imagine something in the vicinity of their sect, and the item would appear out of thin air. All it would cost was Gather Spirit Ancestor's holy power. The saints' world was magical. It was very beautiful. It was a place that the creatures outside could never imagine. Chapter 1130. Like a dragon in the shallows, like a tiger in the plains. I'm a holy relic personally made by the great Saint Meng Mei. How could it fall into the hands of a mere creator? There was a thumb-sized, lotus-shaped, colorful light rolling and rocking between Wu Qi's brows, and it was letting out a resentful cry that sounded like the cry of a resentful girl from the depths of a palace. You are even a newborn who has just obtained the holy power, a little bird that has just hatched from the egg. With the destruction of the holy realm, Shurgai was also greatly damaged, and the Blue Nightmare Palace was almost destroyed. Even though Shurgai had the ability to gather the spiritual chi of heaven and earth after the destruction of the holy realm, he could not extract much holy power from the chaotic aura. He did not even have enough holy power to sustain his daily needs, let alone recover from his injuries and maintain the stability of the Blue Nightmare Palace. If Wu Qi had not run into him this time, Shurgai would probably have perished together with the Blue Nightmare Palace after a while. In other words, Wu Qi had run into him and channeled a strand of holy power into him. Shurgai was so hungry that his eyes were green. He hesitated for a long time between the dignity of the holy relic and the life of the holy relic, and finally chose his own life. He absorbed Wu Qi's holy power and fused it into his own core, converting it into the holy power he needed to heal his injuries and maintain his survival. From then on, Wu Qi was his master. After all, a holy relic was no different from an ordinary living being, except that its appearance was a little different. In reality, Shurgai was a living thing. Since it was a living thing, it paid particular attention to the concept of milk being mother. Now that Wu Qi had holy power, he was Shurgai's nanny, and Shurgai could only listen to him obediently. Hearing Shurgai's bitter complaints, Wu Qi scolded him impatiently. So much nonsense. Why don't you spit out all the holy power I gave you, then find a cesspool and throw you into it? Shurgai immediately shut his mouth, and used his most passionate and flattering voice to shout, "Master, your light is enough to illuminate the entire chaos. You are the chosen one, you will definitely restore the glory of the holy realm. Ah, give me another strand of holy power, this junk tastes terrible. Apart from the various primordial treasures Wu Qi had plundered from Daozu and the Buddha, he had given a few to each of Princess Zhonglu and the others to protect themselves. The rest were gathered near Shigai. Shigai was devouring the primordial treasures and extracting the various spiritual qi and substances he needed. After all, the Grand Mist artifacts were formed from the projections left behind by the saint artifacts when the holy world was destroyed, and the spiritual gathering treasures could benefit a lot from them. But how could the things he had painstakingly refined be compared to eating? In Shigai was Ling Shigai and Shigai? Shigai, a hell. God, a god, a god. Shigai was so noisy that Wu Qi felt a headache coming on. Helplessly, he transferred a strand of holy power to Shigai, and in return, Shigai immediately began flattering him. It had to be said that flattery was very popular in the holy realm, and the disciples of Blue Nightmare Palace treated their patriarch the same way. Shigai had stayed in Blue Nightmare Palace for God knows how many years, and had learned all kinds of flattery. After all, Shigai was a product of the profound and unfathomable holy realm. Shigai's flattery had almost reached the realm of Tao, and was much more brilliant than those in Pangu world. Even though Wu Qi knew that Shigai was flattering him, he still felt as if his bones had become a few kilograms lighter. He couldn't help but transfer a few more strands of holy power to Shigai. Shigai's words were really soothing. While flattering Wu Qi, Shigai released his spirit power to fawn on Princess Zhonglu and Yixia. Yixia was one of the most powerful beings in Pangu world, but Shigai didn't think she was that powerful. On the contrary, Princess Zhonglu was so powerful that she had already touched the edge of the divine Tao. Shigai knew very well what kind of attitude he should have towards a future powerful being. Especially, Princess Zhonglu and Yixia were the wives of his current master. Even if they were slightly weaker, Shigai still had to try his best to please them. Chattering all the way, it had been more than half a year since Wu Qi and his companions left Blue Nightmare Palace. Following the blurry memories of Wu Qi's previous life, the group trudged through the chaos, searching for traces of the ancient sacred palace. Since Blue Nightmare Palace had such a large area of ruins left behind, how could the 7 most powerful beings in the sacred world not have left some powerful arrangements in the chaos? Perhaps they had left something that could turn the world upside down? The ancient sacred palace should be a place where the 7 powerful beings and the other saints kept some information and items. Pangu had also said that the ancient sacred palace had an extraordinary origin. Everything in it was unimaginable, and Pangu had gained many benefits from it. Although Wu Qi had already obtained a lot of information from Shigai, he still had to go to the ancient sacred palace. With Shigai by his side, many of Wu Qi's questions had been answered. Shigai knew a lot about the process of the destruction of the sacred world and the methods of the 13 world breakers. In particular, the main cultivation method of Blue Nightmare Palace made Wu Qi very happy. Shigai had taught Wu Qi a whole set of 1,800 runes. These days, Wu Qi had been studying these complicated runes under Shigai's guidance. The runes from the sacred world were the core of all the power in the sacred world. To be more precise, from a different perspective, the inscriptions in the saints' world were the genomes of all living beings in the saints' world. The bodies and souls of all living beings in the saints' world were created from the natural matter and energy of the inscriptions. When different runes were put together, they formed countless races with different shapes, powers, and even personalities. So, these runes were like the genomes of the creatures in the sacred world. The only difference was the strength of the runes and the combination of the runes. If Wu Qi could combine 1,800 runes, together with sufficient holy energy, he would be able to create the strongest race in Blue Nightmare Palace, the Blue Lynx. It was a creature that looked like a giant lizard, but it had giant wings on its back. Its body was covered in beautiful blue feathers. It was a powerful creature that was good at using the power of light. But in terms of Shigai, With Wu Qi's current strength, even if he could understand all the mysteries of these 1,800 runes and integrate them into one, he could only create a single hair of a blue lynx at most. After all, the blue lynx was an extremely powerful race. Their newborn offspring had the strength of the mortal level, and with a little effort, they could break through to the originator level. How could Wu Qi, who had just climbed the threshold of the originator level, be qualified to create such a powerful creature? Listening to Shurgai's grumbling along the way, perhaps because so many years of loneliness had made Shurgai a little schizophrenic. In short, he had completely become a chatterbox. After searching hard in the chaos, Wu Qi and the others finally came to a pale green star in the chaos. This pale green star had left a deep impression in Yuan Ling's memory. Inside the star was a giant emerald with a diameter of hundreds of millions of miles, and on the outside was a layer of highly toxic liquid that was 30 million miles thick. The highly toxic liquid kept erupting in all directions, forming this poisonous star, which even Chaos Fiend gods dared not to approach. Wu Qi vaguely remembered that Yuan Ling had been near this pale green star, tracking the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs, bypassing a few hidden energy tides, and then was suddenly teleported to the ancient sacred palace. But the memory came to an abrupt end here, because as soon as Yuan Ling showed up, he was smashed to pieces by hundreds of fiend gods. Glancing around with mixed emotions, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "It should be around here. With our current strength, we can definitely get out of the ancient sacred palace unscathed after entering it. Shurgai, don't be lazy, just help me with your knowledge." A clear cloud emerged from between Wu Qi's brows. Amidst the cloud, he glanced around furtively, smacked his lips and said with mixed emotions, "I feel like there are some traces of restrictive spells here. But it's not. You know, Master, you are probably tracking the palace left behind by some extremely powerful being. If it is really the work of some extremely powerful being, with our vision and strength, we can never find any trace." Wu Qi sneered and said, "But you have to think about it. After the sacred realm is destroyed, who could have the power of an extremely powerful being? If the 7 saints used all their means to conceal the ancient sacred palace, wouldn't the act of leaving the ancient sacred palace behind be a joke? The pure grave? Or a memorial? Or left for those realm breakers?" Shurgai smiled as if he was enlightened, then he said flatteringly, "Master, you are so wise, how about giving me another stream of holy power?" "Oh, thank you, Master. Your generosity is comparable to the greatest source of light in the sacred realm, the sacred source light. In that case, they will definitely leave some traces behind. And, if there is any dangerous restrictive spell, it will only target the realm breakers and those who overestimate themselves and enter by mistake." Wu Qi's divine consciousness and Shurgai's divine consciousness merged into one, turning into invisible waves that swept around. Right on one side of the green star, a shadowy figure that looked like a memorial flashed faintly. Wu Qi immediately took out a bottle of spirit pills and distributed them to the crowd. One by one, they swallowed the pills, then plunged into the thick poisonous liquid of the toxic star, heading in the direction of the shadowy figure. Unlike the time when he had to follow the 7 Buddhas and 9 Taoists to find the traces of the ancient sacred palace, this time when Wu Qi came here, he found the existence of the entrance directly. Compared to his previous life, his strength was a far cry from his previous life. He was far, far stronger than he was in his previous life. After struggling in the sticky green poisonous liquid for a few days, relying on the effect of the panacea to expel the terrible poison, the group of people finally arrived in front of the entrance that Wu Qi's divine consciousness had sensed, panting. But as soon as they arrived, Wu Qi's face couldn't help but change. What appeared in front of everyone was not just one memorial arch, but 9 identical memorial arches. The 9 simple memorial arches drifted in front of him like mist, like the entrances to hell. However, before Wu Qi could decide which entrance to enter, a long, drawn-out roar was heard coming from afar. Everyone hastily looked over, and they saw a giant centipede, several miles long and shaped like a giant dragon, charging furiously towards them while emanating countless streams of green poisonous smoke and flame. This centipede with a dragon's head, a scorpion's tail, and over 100 sharp poisonous claws was still several hundred kilometers away from Wu Qi and the others, but they could already smell a pungent stench. The anti-poison panacea that Wu Qi had refined using precious materials from Yuan Ling's nether realm had lost its effect. Tu Xiaobai's face suddenly turned pale green. Chapter 1131. Wu Qi's expression changed as he looked at the centipede rushing towards them while spewing poisonous flames. The poison prevention pills he gave them were concocted from 17 of the most potent spirit herbs in Yuan Ling's nether realm, each of which had the miraculous effect of repelling all kinds of poisons. These poison prevention pills also represented Yuan Ling's highest achievement in the Tao of alchemy, and each of them was extremely precious. But Tu Xiaobai, who had taken the pills, was knocked out by the poisonous smoke of the centipede? What was that centipede? In his previous life, Wu Qi did not remember encountering this thing when he entered the ancient sacred palace. If it had existed back then, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs would have been poisoned to death long ago, and they would not have had the chance to establish their own sects in Pangu world. Zhu Ling's voice resounded faintly. Run, they actually left Lu Heng behind to guard the door. It seems that this green centipede has just hatched, but it is the descendant of the strongest race created by the green centipede saint after all. Although it is innately weak, it is still easy for it to deal with a little person who has just entered the Genesis level. Wu Qi was taken aback. Then he grabbed Tu Xiaobai and brought the company as he ran towards the 9 archways that were very close to them. In his previous life, he did not remember there being 9 archways here, and there seemed to be only one passage. But now that the green centipede had hatched, and the door to the ancient sacred palace had changed into these 9 drifting archways, could it be that something had changed in the ancient sacred palace? Before he could think about whether the change was good or bad, Wu Qi led the others into the archway closest to them. The green centipede behind them let out a discontented roar, then opened its mouth and spewed out a stinking green flame that barely brushed past their heads. With a thud, Yuan Qing could no longer withstand the terrible toxicity of the flames. He rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. Fortunately, Ao Buzan grabbed him by the neck and carried him into the archway. Rushing into the memorial arch, everyone only heard the soft sound of bubbles bursting, and there was no strange feeling of the world spinning. They arrived at a small courtyard with great ease. The courtyard was about 2 miles long and wide, and the fertile soil was covered with strange plum blossoms. The red sun hung high in the sky, but at the same time, snow was falling. The half-foot-long green grass was mostly covered in snow, and only an inch-long thin grass poked its head out. White snow fell on the hundreds of different kinds of plum blossoms in the courtyard. The branches were black and shaped like dragons, with half-inch-long icicles hanging from them. The egg-sized flowers were in full bloom, and the plum blossoms of different colors exuded their fragrance. There were even a few white snowflakes stuck to the stamens of the flowers. Together with the red sun in the sky, it really looked like an immortal's mansion. A 3-foot-wide stream meandered through the middle of the courtyard. Beside the stream were 2 thatched pavilions and a 3-bay thatched cottage. There was an extremely fat furry creature lying in front of the house. It looked like a dog, but it had the markings of a fierce tiger. It had 3 long tails behind its back. Its body was nearly 2 meters long, and it was wagging its tails. Its eyes were closed as it snored, and the fat on its body was shaking along with its snores. Illusion or what? Wu Qi was surprised. He picked a plum blossom off a nearby branch, carefully put it under his nose, and sniffed. The strong aroma made his internal organs clear and smooth, and a cold stream of air rushed straight to his feet, making him shiver and feel very comfortable. If this is truly a relic left in the Holy Realm. There is no such thing as illusion in the Holy Realm. Gathering Spirit gave Wu Qi a severe blow. The Holy Realm also has magic seals and magic formations, but illusion. Since we can create things out of nothing, why do we need those unreal things when we set up magic formations? Everything is real, but there are countless dangers hidden in the truth. In fact, Master, you shouldn't have picked this flower just now. Wu Qi's body stiffened, and he hurriedly threw the plum blossom in his hand far away. Gathering Spirit sighed and said, "Putting aside those top-notch mighty figures, if Patriarch Lan Mang had set up a courtyard like this, just this plum blossom alone could have hidden at least thousands of ways to kill people. Master, you must remember not to use your common sense to judge anything in this place." With a sneer, Gathering Spirit muttered, "The flower you threw out just now is very likely to be a thunderfire that can blow up everyone here. The plum blossom on this tree could very well be a life-saving spirit pill. The long grass under the tree could be a sentient animal like us, or even a powerful holy realm warrior. Even the snowflakes in the sky, who knows what they are?" Wu Qi was stunned. Next to him, Ao Buzan asked hesitantly, "Are we just going to stand here and not move?" Gathering Spirit sighed and said softly, "Since we are already in here, how can we not move? Are we going to be imprisoned here until we die? But we have to be careful, we have to be careful. What could be more unlucky than a weakest creator bringing a group of ignorant mortals into a relic left behind by perhaps the 7 strongest saints in the Holy Realm?" Sighing again and again, Gathering Spirit cried out in a tone of disbelief and surprise, "Master, those people you told me about, can they really return alive from the ancient sacred palace? Are you sure it is their true forms that returned? Are they replicas that the ancient sage's palace condensed again after they were destroyed that retain their memories and personalities?" Gathering Spirit's words sent a chill down the spines of Wu Qi and the others, especially the last few words he said, which made even Wu Qi fall into an indescribable loss. Yes, the Holy Realm has such powerful abilities. Are Pan-gu, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs, and the 9 Tao patriarchs really the true forms that came to the ancient sacred palace? Perhaps the real Pan-gu and the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs had already been destroyed by the ancient sacred palace, and what left the ancient sacred palace were just replicas that kept all their physical characteristics. However, a more complicated and tangled question emerged. If all the physical and psychological characteristics of those replicas were the same as the real Pan-gu, were they the real Pan-gu or replicas? Standing to one side, Qixia suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. She shook her head hard and slapped her forehead with a backhand. She gave a low growl, then quickly incanted a long series of evil, incomprehensible spells. After a long while, Yi Xia said with a cold voice, "Don't think about it anymore, or your soul will certainly be severely injured. Just now, I was just thinking about whether I am the original me, or the me created by this damned place, and whether my memory was originally there or created by someone. As a result, my divine soul nearly collapsed." No sooner had Yi Xia finished speaking than Lord Xianxing, Catfish, Goldhorn, and the others all coughed up a mouthful of blood at the same time. Lord Xianxing smiled bitterly and said, "It's a little too late. I was just thinking about this question just now. Who exactly is standing in this forest of flowers now?" Wu Qi kept waving his hand to stop Lord Xianxing from continuing. "Don't think about these things," he said in a deep voice. "You can't think about it. In short, we are who we are and nothing else. Well, just do whatever you want. If we are going to die, let's die together." Gathering Spirit sighed faintly and said, "I'm afraid that I won't be able to live or die." As soon as the words came out of his mouth, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Just like how you are still trapped in the chaos with a serious injury? How about I throw you back into the chaos?" As soon as Wu Qi's words came out of his mouth, Gathering Spirit shut his mouth immediately. After a while, a tsunami of flattery drowned Wu Qi. Fearing that Wu Qi would really abandon him, Gathering Spirit used all his skills to flatter Wu Qi comfortably. The group of people glanced left and right. The small courtyard was surrounded by high walls, with black tiles and white walls. It looked neat, but it blocked their sight, making them unable to see what was happening outside. No matter how long Wu Qi scanned the place with his divine sense, the white walls were just white walls. His divine sense could not penetrate through them, and could only echo in the courtyard, which measured a few miles in both width and length. With a wry smile, Wu Qi shook his head and pressed both hands on the top of Tu Xiaobai and Yuan Qing's heads, sucking out the poisonous gas that had invaded their bodies. The heaven refining cauldron came out slowly, and the frighteningly hot Yuan Ling true flame turned the few wisps of poisonous gas into nothingness. Tu Xiaobai and Yuan Qing slowly woke up, but they looked listless. The few wisps of poisonous gas just now had greatly damaged their vitality, and they could not recover for a long time. He fed them a few pills to restore their energy, then asked them to ride on the back of the nine-tailed beast. After that, he led them out of the flowering forest, across the stream, and came straight to the strange beast, which looked like a dog, had stripes like a tiger, and had 3 tails behind its rump. After circling twice around the strange beast, which was astonishingly fat, weighing at least 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms, Wu Qi carefully scanned the body of the sleeping strange beast with his divine sense. After pondering for a while, he grabbed a fist-sized metal-eating wasp from Yuan Ling's nether realm, and gently threw the wasp, whose stinger was an inch long, onto the head of the strange beast. Suddenly, the snoring beast opened his eyes and slapped himself on the head, turning the wasp, whose body was as tough as an ordinary gold immortal item, into minced meat with one slap. The exotic beast muttered a few words and finally managed to get up with great difficulty. He stood on the ground on all fours, his fat belly sticking firmly to his belly, which surprised Wu Qi, and he wondered how he would look like when he walked. After taking a few deep breaths, the strange beast rolled his eyes, shook his head, and said, "I've slept for so long, and I was finally woken up. I was just about to go back to sleep and recuperate. Why did you throw bugs on me? And these are the bugs that look so vicious and ruthless. The human heart is not what it used to be." The strange beast threw his head back and yawned, then stared at Wu Qi and asked, "What are you doing?" Looking at the strange beast who kept grumbling, Wu Qi nodded and said with a smile, "We got lost and came in here by accident. May I ask, Senior, what is this place?" The strange beast grinned, then threw his head back and said with a laugh, "Senior? Someone actually calls me Senior? TSK, but how many years have I been sleeping? It seems reasonable for you to call me Senior." Narrowing his eyes, the strange beast sized up Wu Qi and his company for a while, then clicked his tongue and praised, "How did a little creator and a group of mortals come in here? Why didn't you get killed by the green centipede at the entrance?" Wu Qi's heart leaped. Judging from the way this fellow said, it was obvious that he knew some of the settings in this place. At least, he even knew about the existence of the green centipede in front of the entrance, so he should know the origin of this little courtyard. But before Wu Qi could say anything, the strange beast had already opened his mouth and pointed his fat right claw at his mouth. "Wine? Meat? I'm full, and I'll answer all your questions." Chapter 1132. 1,000 liters of fruit wine was poured into the strange beast's mouth, and the enraged strange beast immediately became as obedient as a dog. He revealed a brilliant smile and nodded repeatedly, saying, "Wonderful, it's indeed been a long time. Although it's a little thin, it's still a good wine. Keep going. How can you just take a sip of such a good wine? Good wine, good meat, I want to fill my stomach." Theoretically, if Wu Qi really wanted to make some wine and meat out of nothing, he should be able to do it, but in fact, he had no idea how to do it. This fellow was a foodie. Nevertheless, the beast's appetite was beyond Wu Qi's expectation. When the wine, which could make an ordinary Tao reasoning immortal drunk to death, was poured into his mouth, his expression did not change at all. He just stared at Wu Qi, as if he was addicted to wine and could not wait to snatch the wine from Wu Qi. Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi took out dozens more jars of wine and poured them into the beast's mouth. But the beast just kept gulping down the wine, and did not even burp. Therefore, Catfish always carried a large amount of food with her. She had also formed an interstitial world, in which there were countless birds and beasts, and these were her rations at any time. Seeing Wu Qi giving her a meaningful glance, Catfish Flooddragon casually waved her hand and pulled out a gold core realm black tiger demon. Clenching his teeth, Wu Qi stared at the beast, motioning Princess Zhonglu and the others to step back, then reached out his right hand. The beast breathed out a long sigh, narrowed his eyes at Wu Qi, and said with a smile, You are the creator, can't you get me a good piece of meat? Wu Qi bared his teeth and snarled. Then, another clump of liquid appeared in his palm. Wu Qi had poured a jar of 500 kilograms of Yuan Ling 100 fruits wine into the strange beast's mouth, and he did not even let out a burp? Throwing the whale aside, Wu Qi looked at the beast and asked with a smile, "What do you think of this piece of meat?" The beast burst into wild laughter, wagging his 3 tails complacently as he said, good meat, good meat. Tiske, your wine is just so, but this meat tiske. The beast sucked in a cold breath, then threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. Don't expect me to drink this thing. I won't touch it even if you beat me to death. Are you sure you want to give me wine and meat and not poison me? Wu Qi was shocked, and everyone turned to look at the glutton. Perhaps he was not here to eat and drink at all, but just wanted to see the overall strength of Wu Qi, the founder of the sect? Perhaps, as long as Wu Qi used the power of the creation he created would be, even if it was the worst wine he could make. Wu Qi pondered for a long while, staring blankly at the beast. He had indeed studied all kinds of runes left behind by the Blue Nightmare Palace, and he possessed the holy power, becoming the so-called creator. He had even created some ordinary flowers and plants in the Blue Nightmare Palace. However, there were all sorts of restrictions left behind in the Blue Nightmare Palace. 70% of those flowers, plants, bees, and butterflies were created by borrowing the power of the Blue Nightmare Palace ruins. Wu Qi smiled embarrassedly. Once again, he activated the holy power, and another clump of wine gathered in his palm. But this time, it was not the aroma of the wine, but a strong smell of oil. Gradually, the color of the wine turned darker and darker, and before long, a sticky substance that looked like oil dripped onto the ground. Meat, meat. After swallowing tens of jars of wine, the beast suddenly cried out. Loud rumbling noises came from his stomach, showing that he was extremely hungry and needed a lot of meat to fill his stomach. Catfish Flooddragon's face turned green instantly. She stared blankly at the broken body of the tiger demon in her hand, then casually threw it into the distance. As the beast had said, if one were to carefully consider the matter of eating and swallowing a tiger demon alive, it would be very inconvenient. But Catfish Flooddragon and her companions were used to eating and drinking like this. In any case, this was what they did when they were demons in Meng Mountains, and no one really cared about the problem. But now, when she was exposed by the beast, Catfish Flooddragon felt a sour saliva flowing out of her mouth, and she nearly spat it out. A clump of holy power condensed in his palm. Wu Qi fused his divine will into it, and countless runes flashed and flashed rapidly in his palm. Gradually, the aroma of wine wafted out of his palm, and before long, a clump of sticky wine the size of a human head appeared out of thin air. But the wine could only exist for a brief moment. A spark flickered across the air, and a loud boom rang out as the wine burst out, sending a violent impact that swept across the entire courtyard. The beast stared blankly at Wu Qi and let out a deep roar. After a long while, he gnashed his teeth and said, "Good wine, good meat. If you keep fooling me with this lowly stuff, you will never know what is in this courtyard, and you will never be able to leave this place." Wu Qi picked up the wine jar and drank all the remaining wine in it in one gulp. Holding back the sharp pain in his throat, Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "Wine, of course it's wine. Don't you want wine and meat? Is there a problem with drinking wine first and then eating meat?" The strange beast looked at Wu Qi with a smile. Wagging his tail, he said slowly, "A primordial creator, a primordial creator. Wine and meat are nothing to me. You are a creator. After so many years, I'm really lucky to be able to see a creator when I just woke up. Good wine and meat." Wu Qi understood. Immediately, he took out a jar of fruit wine that weighed 1,000 kilograms. It was brewed with the best immortal fruits found in Yuan Ling's nether realm, and during the period when Wu Qi was reincarnated, the wine had been fermented in a cellar for a long time, so it tasted extremely fragrant and contained abundant natural energy. The natural energy contained in a mouthful of fruit wine was comparable to a supreme-grade gold immortal pill. Wu Qi had tasted all kinds of fine wines in Pangu world, but none of them could compare with the fruit wine he brewed himself. A bright gleam flashed across the beast's eyes. He gave the 30-feet-long tiger a glance, shook his head, and said with a sigh, "Can this thing be eaten?" Wu Qi remained silent for a moment, then turned to look at Catfish, Goldhorn, and the others. There was a group of foodies around Wu Qi, and Catfish was the one with the biggest appetite. Goldhorn, Silverhorn, Goldfeather, and Silverfeather only had an extraordinary interest in the flesh and blood of dragons, but Catfish was not afraid of raw or cooked, of any race, old or young, dead or alive. As long as it was made of flesh and blood, she had a strong interest in devouring it, no matter how strangely shaped it was. The crowd exchanged a glance in horror. With a calm expression, Wu Qi fished out another jar of fruit wine and poured it into the beast's mouth. In his previous life, Yuan Ling was a loner, and he did not have many close friends. He spent most of his time in Yuan Ling's nether realm, concocting pills, crafting items, and brewing all kinds of fine wine when he was bored. Countless innate divine wood roots were planted in Yuan Ling's nether realm, and the ingredients for brewing wine were very abundant. In the span of a few eons, Yuan Ling had brewed at least tens of billions of jars of all kinds of fine wine. The beast rested his 2 front paws on his chin as he lay comfortably on the ground, gave Catfish a sidelong glance, and said with a cold grin, "No matter how hungry I am, I won't eat such a lousy thing. To make a good meat, firstly, the ingredients must be excellent. Secondly, the ingredients must be excellent. Thirdly, the culinary skill must be excellent. Only when all 3 are the best, can I make a good meat." The violent explosion was roughly equivalent to the immortal thunder unleashed by a gold immortal. But the huge courtyard did not change at all, and even the snowflakes falling from the sky did not shake. It was just a few jars of wine, and to Wu Qi, it was not a heartache. The beast clicked his tongue, shook his head, and said with a long sigh, "They are raw and not skinned, and their fur is still stuck to them. There might even be feces in their bellies. Good heavens, how can you eat such a thing? What are you going to do with the feces and fur? Spit them out from your mouth." The beast's hair stood up as he looked at Wu Qi helplessly and said, "Are you going to prepare wine and meat for me, or are you going to kill me? However, in this courtyard, you can't kill me." Slowly, the beast opened his mouth and said to Wu Qi with a smile, "The wine just now doesn't count. Bring me some more wine and meat." Wu Qi gave the beast a look, and without saying a word, he fished out a huge dragon whale from his world, measuring about 1,000 feet long. It was a prehistoric beast with a cultivation base of heaven immortal realm. Although it was a prehistoric beast, it was shrouded in immortal energy, and did not smell fishy. Instead, it had a strange fragrance of dragon saliva. The beast gave the dragon whale a glance, shook his head, and said with a sigh, "The quality is too low, too low." Catfish flew into a rage instantly. She transformed her upper body into her dragon form, opened her mouth, and bit off half of the tiger's body. While chewing on the tiger's body, she bellowed furiously, "Why can't I eat it? Didn't I enjoy it very much? How many years have you not eaten fresh meat here? Why are you so picky?" Looking at the beast's wide open mouth, Wu Qi produced a jar of inferior wine brewed by the mortals of Diyu in Pangu continent. It was brewed with the tubers of some plants found in the forest, and it tasted spicy. It was said that drinking it was like being punched in the stomach, and the pungent smell of wine made one wonder if it was pure alcohol. Of course, Wu Qi had tried it before. When the wine was poured on the ground and ignited with a flame, it could indeed burn. In the blink of an eye, 50 kilograms of inferior wine was poured into the beast's mouth. The eyes of the strange beast, whose face was filled with hope, suddenly went wide. His body trembled violently, and all the fat on his body began to tremble violently. His long hair stood straight up as he stared at Wu Qi in horror, then let out a shrill howl from his throat. "What did you feed me? Poison?" Chapter 1133. With a loud bang, the head-sized ball of liquefied wine in Wu Qi's palm turned into countless balls of lightning fire that poured out in all directions. The terrifying power scared Princess Zhonglu and the others so much that they had to take out more than a dozen grandmiss treasures to barely protect themselves. One of Jiawei's long tails was stuck by a ball of lightning fire. It was so hot that Jiawei trembled and almost burst into tears. The strange beast stared blankly at Wu Qi, who was covered in black smoke. After a long time, it stammered, "Are you here to feed me wine and meat, or to kill me? You are the founder, but with your level, no matter who your master is, he will kill you with a kick, lest you bring shame to your master." Smacking its lips, the strange beast rolled its eyes and sneered, "Don't blame me for not reminding you, there is not a trace of usable holy spiritual energy in this courtyard. If you run out of holy energy, there is no way to replenish it. TSK, if you can't feed me, you won't be able to get out." Wu Qi's face darkened. He had tried to condense a bit of wine more than 300 times in a row, but it was the first time he had relied on himself to condense an item. He had not succeeded even once, and had consumed about 30% of the holy energy in his body. According to the strange beast, if he really ran out of holy energy and had no way to replenish it, wouldn't he be trapped here until he died? Zhu Ling reminded Wu Qi with a low murmur. Sure enough, there was not even a wisp of holy energy found in the holy realm in this courtyard. Holy spiritual energy was the source of energy for all the almighty experts in the holy world. Even the sages had to absorb holy spiritual energy to replenish their own consumption. There was no holy spiritual energy in this courtyard, so if Wu Qi ran out of holy energy, he would not be able to replenish his own consumption. As for the huge amount of immortal stones and spirit stones that Wu Qi carried with him, although they also contained an extremely large amount of pure energy, they did not contain any holy spiritual energy. Therefore, Wu Qi, a mere founder, could not use these immortal stones and spirit stones to convert them into holy energy. The spirit gathering tool was only a saint tool. It could only absorb saint spirit chi. There was no saint spirit chi in the immortal stones and spirit stones, so it could not provide any help to Wu Qi. According to the theory of spiritual gathering, only the 7 supreme experts of the saints' world could break free from the restrictions of the saints' chi. They could extract the saints' chi from the various energies in the world, so no matter where they were, the 7 saints did not have to worry about running out of saint force. While the spirit-gathering Luo was nagging at Wu Qi had already taken out dozens of fist-sized supreme-grade immortal stones. In front of spirit gathering, Wu Qi extracted all the immortal chi from the immortal stone. Amidst the surprised and frightened screams of Zhu Ling, the immortal energy in Wu Qi's body slowly transformed into holy energy. The holy power was as pure and sparkling as diamond dust. Impossible! This is something only the 7 supreme saints can do. How could you have such a great divine ability? Spirit gathering tool screamed hoarsely. If he had hands, perhaps he could not help but grab Wu Qi's neck and interrogate him. Wu Qi was too lazy to pay any attention to spirit gathering tool's screams. He himself was still confused about it. What did spirit gathering tool say just now? He was not limited by the saint spirit chi, and could use all kinds of energies to replenish his holy energy at any time. Was this an ability that only the 7 supreme saints could have? Then what was the deal with the scroll of stealing? After successfully cultivating the mystic arts in the scroll of stealing, one would have the same ability. Furthermore, the scroll of stealing could use immortal energy or any other energy to form all kinds of items that had been branded, such as Kunwu swords. The Yellow Emperor Xianyuan had given Wu Qi 108 Kunwu swords, but Wu Qi had used tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of them to construct formations. The various divine abilities in the scroll of stealing already had the embryonic form of the various divine abilities of the saint force. It was as if a lighthouse had suddenly lit up in the dark, and Wu Qi felt the fog in front of his eyes suddenly dispersed. Was it really so difficult to form all kinds of fine wines with the saint force? Compared to an ancient divine weapon like Kunwu swords, the wine was nothing. He could form Kunwu swords and all kinds of secret treasures at will, so why couldn't he form fine wines? Especially when Wu Qi was still at the early stage of Tao reasoning realm, he could already form a secret treasure like Kunwu swords. And now, he was already a primordial creation realm cultivator. How could he be weaker than Wu Qi at that time? It was because Wu Qi thought too highly of the Saint Force. Wasn't that the truth? He threw his head back and gave a loud laugh. Amidst the surprised and terrified screams of the crowd, he waved his hand casually in the air, unleashing a torrent of holy energy, which transformed into a stream of wine that was tens of feet wide and emanated a strong aroma of wine as it poured down. There were thousands of fine wines in the tens of feet wide spring, and each of them was only as thick as a thumb. It took a water arrow that shot through the air, and the thousands of wines converged into this wine spring. The strange beast opened its mouth wide in astonishment and swallowed the wine spring in one gulp. Beaming with joy, he kept nodding his head. These fine wines were made by Wu Qi using his pure holy energy, and each contained a very strong holy energy. Not to mention the taste, the holy energy itself was enough to make the strange beast very happy. After filling the beast's stomach with a wine spring that was about thousands of miles long, the strange beast finally burped. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Wu Qi and said, "Enough, enough, I'm very full. Meat, where is the meat?" Then he casually drew a line in the air, and large chunks of fresh meat that glinted like diamonds fell from the sky. Yuan Ling's flames surged out and wrapped up these large chunks of meat. Soon, the meat was grilled until it was tender on the inside and sizzling on the outside. Countless spices and powders drifted down from the sky, while wine and honey were smeared on the grilled meat. After a while, thousands of large chunks of meat were grilled, emitting a strong aroma and a mellow luster. Even without eating, one could tell that this was a supreme delicacy with one's eyes and nose. The strange beast satisfyingly swallowed the last piece of grilled meat. He narrowed his eyes and flatteringly wagged his 3 long tails, then intimately rubbed his giant head on Wu Qi's pants. He praised, "Good wine, good meat, you're a good kid and I'm lucky too. I thought I would have to wait here for many years to find a suitable candidate, but I didn't think I would be so lucky." Clicking his tongue, the strange beast looked at Wu Qi, grinned and said, "Welcome to the Holy Palace of 7. There are many opportunities here, but there are also many dangers. You can reach the sky with one step, but you can also die instantly. It all depends on your luck and your power." Wu Qi slapped the strange beast's head and stopped him from boasting. He asked, "This place's real name is Holy Palace of 7? It seems like Holy Palace of 7 has awakened. Why would Holy Palace of 7 wake up now?" The strange beast squinted his eyes. He looked at Wu Qi and quietly said, "It is because 13 Break World people appeared at the same time. When the Holy World was destroyed, most of the 13 Break World people were destroyed. A Yuan Ling returned to the immortal soul mark to regenerate his body and soul. Now, the Break World people who regenerated their bodies and souls are releasing their presences. That is why Holy Palace of 7 has awakened." Wu Qi's heart sank. The Break World people were Thousand Head, Huan Yen, and Spirit Puppet. Those 3 had encountered Chaos Demon God, and Pan Gu and the other Chaos Demon gods sealed them up. But the other Break World people had not appeared. When the Holy World was destroyed, their bodies and souls were destroyed too. Was that so? Were they using the power of the immortal soul mark to regenerate their bodies and souls? Now that they had been reborn, were they going to come out and harm people again? Was that why Holy Palace of 7 had suddenly awakened? Was that why all the restrictions were revealed? Why did Holy Palace of 7 exist? What kind of things were stored inside? In those huge stars, there were tens of thousands of corridors and innumerable pavilions connected to each other. Chapter 1134. In the boundless void, one's sight was filled with dazzling silver stars. Some were near, some were far, some were big, some were small, but all of them were frozen in the void, motionless. However, these stars were arranged in a very complicated pattern in the void. If one stared at them for a long time, one would feel that these stars were moving all over the sky, and one's eyes would be filled with silver ribbons of light, which would often make one feel dizzy and fall to the ground. Audiobook stared at the few stars for a long while, then held his head in his arms and fell to the ground, unable to move anymore. He let out a few howls and spat out a few mouthfuls of saliva with difficulty, then shook his head and dared not to take another glance at the surrounding stars. Amidst the boundless starry sky, the courtyard, which was several miles long and wide, floated quietly. Tens of plank paths of different widths extended from the edge of the courtyard, leading to tens of exquisite towers in a distance. The plank paths twisted and turned, giving them a very dangerous look. The widest of them was only 10 feet, and the narrowest was only half a foot, hovering in the bottomless void. Even though Wu Qi and the others were all mighty experts, they were still frightened by the sight of it, and felt a chill running down their spines. This is... Wu Qi shook the map of the 9 palaces. The strange beast tilted its head, smacked its lips and said, "This is the star paths of the 9 palaces surrounding the 7 holy palaces, and I am the map that recorded all the star paths. I don't know what is in the 9 palaces, and I don't know what is on the path. I don't know what you will encounter, and I don't know whether you will die or not." After talking for a while, the strange beast laughed and said, "But I do know one thing. If you don't choose a path, you will never be able to leave this place. But it seems that your cultivation base has reached a point where you can live forever, so it won't be a problem for you to stay here for a long time. Besides, there are both men and women among you, so it will be fun to make babies here." Noisy. Wu Qi shook the map of the 9 palaces, then gave Princess Zhonglu a glance. Princess Zhonglu nodded with a smile and stepped forward to stand beside Wu Qi. Wu Qi glanced at Xia again. Xia nodded indifferently. A 5-colored cloud wrapped around her body, and she floated up into the air, following closely behind Wu Qi. Audiobook stood up slowly and patted his chest. "What are you afraid of? Let's go." Lao Tzu didn't believe that Lao Tzu could be cheated here. How many storms and waves have we weathered? How can we capsize here? The exotic beast snickered coldly and cast a sidelong glance at Audiobook, but didn't say a word. Wu Qi pondered for a long while, then brought the group of people to the side of the spacious plank road at the edge of the courtyard. The plank road was about 10 feet wide, built with white mica stones that were as thin as cicadas' wings. About 10 feet in circumference, the mica stones floated in midair, with a distance of 70 to 80 feet between each other. Countless mica stones stretched forward in a meandering manner, leading to a small bronze building several hundred miles away, with a 3-story tall roof tile and red pillars. Looking from afar, there was a square several acres wide in front of the building, on which stood a golden statue of a man, about 30 feet tall. Carefully stepping onto the plank road made of mica stones, the group found that the stones were very stable, and they had a slight elasticity when they touched them. When they stepped on them, they felt a cool breeze seeping into their bodies, making them feel comfortable and happy. Standing on the first mica stone, Wu Qi held the map in his hand and asked, "What's the difference between choosing different paths?" The exotic beast licked his lips and said indifferently, "I don't know, I really don't know." He paused briefly, then narrowed his eyes, smiled at Wu Qi and said, "Even if I know, I won't tell you. It's not my fault that I can't tell you." The group of people felt helpless. Wu Qi forcibly restrained the impulse to throw the map into the boundless void. Carefully stepping on the plank road made of mica stones, the group of people walked towards the building. It was not that Wu Qi did not want to fly, but when he walked on the plank road he found that there was a strange restrictive spell in the surrounding space, which prevented him from using any flying magic. He could only walk on the plank road step by step. Fortunately, Wu Qi and his companions all had strong fleshly bodies. It only took them 10 minutes to cross the several hundred miles of road. Soon, they arrived in front of the building. As soon as they set foot on the square in front of the building, they heard a series of crisp cracking noises. Behind them, tens of thousands of mica stones cracked at the same time, turning into powder that formed into a huge rune in the air. Before Wu Qi and his companions could react, the huge rune transformed into a stream of light and shot straight into the golden statue in the square. A muffled buzz rang out as the golden statue suddenly took a step forward. The statue stood 30 feet tall, clad in a heavy golden armor, and his face was hidden. In his right hand was a heavy sword that was 18 feet long. With just a few steps, he came before Wu Qi, swinging the sword down viciously towards Wu Qi. "Damn it!" Wu Qi gave a loud cry. Hurriedly, he flicked his fingers, sending out dozens of kunwu swords that shot up into the sky, clashing right into the huge sword. A deafening boom rang out as the kunwu swords shattered one after another, and the golden sword was less than 3 inches away from Wu Qi's head. Wu Qi grabbed Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia and rolled to the side. Meanwhile, the sword in the statue's hands swept out, slashing viciously at the waists of Wu Qi and his companions. "What the hell is this?" Ao Buzan gave a furious roar. The soul-splitting spear, which had been refined dozens of times in the Blue Nightmare Palace ruins, was much more powerful than a supreme treasure of primordial, and blocked the huge sword with a sharp gleam. Ao Buzan had used the Dragon God combat technique, which was unique to dragons. In that instant, the soul-splitting spear thrust forward at least hundreds of thousands of times, each strike as powerful as the collapse of the heavens, condensing all of Ao Buzan's power. Even with Ao Buzan's cultivation base at the peak of the Tao-breaking realm and his strong Zulong body, all his muscles were almost torn apart after using the technique. Hundreds of thousands of strikes in a flash, each strike with all his strength, had exceeded the load on Ao Buzan's body. But then, a muffled boom rang out, and the blow Ao Buzan unleashed with all his cultivation base was shattered by the huge sword. The soul-splitting spear bent like a hemp flower, while the muscles on Ao Buzan's hands were torn. He staggered and was thrown hundreds of feet away, falling straight into the endless void outside the square. Lord Xianxing gave a furious roar. He grabbed Ao Buzan's calf and tried his best to drag Ao Buzan back. Catfish had already swung the hammer she had condensed dozens of times, smashing it down at the golden statue with all her strength. At the same time, she opened her mouth and sprayed out a stinking black wave, amidst which were countless fist-sized black vortexes spinning rapidly. These vortexes were the natal thunder flame condensed by Catfish Flood Dragon, formed by fusing her dragon blood essence with the essence of water. Not only were they extremely powerful, they also had a very strong corrosive power. A loud clang rang out as Catfish coughed up a mouthful of blood and retreated. The web between her thumb and index finger was torn, and the wounds extended all the way to her shoulders. His numb hands could no longer hold onto that abnormally heavy hammer. The heavy hammer fell to the ground, but did not make the slightest sound. The ground here seemed to be able to absorb all energy, and even the impact of the hammer's fall was completely absorbed. In a hurry, Wu Qi turned around. Seeing that Ao Buzan and Catfish were easily defeated by the statue, he hurriedly threw Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia out, then threw out a rune backhandedly. The rune came from the Blue Nightmare Palace, and it represented the origin power of sand. The earthy yellow rune flashed across Wu Qi's eyes, and then a large amount of soil appeared out of thin air around the statue. Layers and layers of sand kept wrapping around the statue. Each grain of sand weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, and the weight of countless grains of sand could not be calculated at all. The rune changed again, transforming from sand to the magnetic and gravity rune derived from the soil. It was many times stronger than the magnetic force Wu Qi cultivated in those years. The crowd heard a deep, muffled howl coming from the earthy yellow sand and stones, and the golden statue's movement suddenly became sluggish. It became slower and slower, and gradually, a jarring cracking noise was heard coming from inside its body. The statue struggled with all its strength, trying to rush toward Wu Qi, but the magnetic and gravity force kept it firmly in place. The two tremendous forces interacted, and the statue suddenly broke into dozens of pieces. A faint gleam flashed across the Nine Palace road map, and the strange beast's face appeared once again. He nodded at Wu Qi with a smile and said, "Not bad, these mortals around you are not bad. I thought that many people would die here, but only 2 are injured? This is really quite a surprise." Wu Qi held on tightly to the Nine Palace road map and sneered, "This Nine Palace." The strange beast rolled its eyes and laughed. Don't ask me, I don't know anything. Also, don't blame me, I'm just a map, the person who set up the 9 palace is not me. Continue on, or you'll be trapped here until you die. If you want to continue, remember to enter the pavilion and take out everything inside. Of course, for the sake of your wine and meat, let me give you a friendly reminder, the pavilion can also be dangerous. The black gleam slowly dimmed, and the strange beast's face disappeared, leaving only the 9 lumps of silver light on the map. Looking at the broken pieces of the statue on the ground, and then looking at the small building that stood quietly in front of him, Wu Qi took a deep breath. To go in or not to go in, how was he to choose? What was in this small building? What was the risk? Just a statue outside the door had easily injured Ao Buzan and Catfish Flood Dragon. They were both almighty Dao-breaking experts, and their powers were incomparably strong. In Pangu world, they were powerful enough to summon the wind and rain. But here, just a statue had injured them severely. What was in the pavilion? Or should they stay in the pavilion and continue on? There were still endless dangers in front of them. Perhaps, the things in the pavilion could help them improve their overall strength quickly? Scratching his head in annoyance, Wu Qi asked the others with a bitter smile, should we go in or not? Ao Buzan had been exercising a mystic magic to heal his injuries. Gritting his teeth, he said, fortune comes from danger. Perhaps, a girl from the Holy Realm is waiting for me in there? Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes and suddenly thrust her palm towards the door of the pavilion. Of course, we have to go in. Wouldn't we be taking such a risk for nothing? Raising her pair of long eyebrows, Princess Zhonglu said proudly, I don't believe that this place can really trap me to death. Chapter 1135. Princess Zhonglu pushed her palm forward. The door of the building silently opened, and a bright cyan light poured out from the door. Wu Qi walked in the front, carefully stepping over the foot-tall threshold and walking into the building. The first floor of the building was clean and tidy, with a lampstand placed in each corner of the tens of meters squared room. Each lampstand had 9 oil lamps on it. Ji Hao didn't know what kind of oil the lamps were made from, but the cyan light emitted was soft and bright, not dazzling at all. Not even the slightest smell of smoke could be sensed from the lamps. In the middle of the room, a feet-squared thin cloud floated, holding a roughly round-shaped rock. On the rock were extremely tiny mountains, rivers, flowers, and trees. On the rock, there were even people, beasts, birds, and fishes. This was a small world. The rock was no more than 2 feet in diameter and half an inch thin, but it was exquisitely detailed, with all kinds of natural phenomena, such as the rising and falling of the sun, the moon, the stars, the wind, and the rain. The group of people surrounded the thin cloud in surprise, carefully releasing their spirit powers to see the secrets of this rock. This rock was small, but tens of millions of human beings lived on it, just like the ordinary people in Pangu world. These human beings were obviously still in the Stone Age, but they were divided into thousands of different-sized forces, fighting against each other. Sometimes they swallowed other forces, sometimes they split up. They had been fighting against each other all day long. Time flew fast on the rock. Wu Qi and the others had only stood aside for less than 10 minutes, but 3 generations of human beings had already been living in the rock. Tens of thousands of wars had broken out, and hundreds of thousands of their own kind had been killed. During the wars, some intelligent human beings emerged from time to time and became the leaders of different forces, leading their clans to swallow the smaller forces in the surrounding areas. After nearly 100 generations, some human beings had already become strong. They were able to fight lions and tigers, kill flood dragons, and even summon the wind and rain, and summon thunders and fires to attack their enemies. They were worshipped as gods by their people. They led their clans and quickly swallowed the smaller forces in the surrounding areas. Soon, only 3 equally powerful forces were left on the rock. An unavoidable war broke out, and the 3 factions fought until their heads bled. In the end, the leader of one of the factions used a forbidden power, and the plague began to spread everywhere. The people of the 3 factions were either dead or injured, and only a few lucky ones survived in the deep mountains. Of the tens of millions of humans, only a little more than 10,000 survived. The civilization that had developed to the Bronze Age was instantly destroyed. At this point, the rocks suddenly exploded with dazzling lightning. Thunder fell from the sky, and magma spewed out from the ground. The entire world was destroyed in an instant. Everything started from when they first entered the small building. It was also the Stone Age, with tens of millions of people fighting and killing each other. However, Wu Qi and the others noticed that the evolution this time was different from what they had seen before. What is this? After watching the evolution process of the civilization on the rock a dozen times, and every evolution process was completely different, Wu Qi could not help but ask, "What is this thing? What do you want to tell us?" A dim light flashed across the 9 palaces road map, and the strange beast appeared. It muttered in a low voice, "Who knows what it is? Let's see if we can take it away. If you can take it away, take it away. This is my kindest reminder." Well, don't you feel that this is a very powerful sacred artifact? Gathering Spirit was also trembling. Wu Qi's eyebrows trembled, and Gathering Spirit said in a deep voice, "Master, be careful. This area is a powerful sacred artifact. Unlike me, which is only a pure auxiliary sacred artifact, it seems to have the power to evolve a world. Its power is very complicated, and it is not a pure sacred artifact like me." This is a sacred artifact? A sacred artifact with countless living beings inside? Wu Qi was silent for a long time. He said to Princess Zhonglu in a deep voice, "Zixuan, try to see if you can collect it." Before Princess Zhonglu could answer, the strange beast and Gathering Spirit shouted at the same time, "If you don't want to die, don't move. How can a mortal take the sacred artifact? The dignity of a sacred artifact will never allow a mortal to touch it. She will be killed, there is no way she can escape." Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes and breathed out a faint sigh. Wu Qi had no other choice. He carefully reached out and grabbed the rock, then injected a stream of sacred energy into it. The rock trembled slightly, then suddenly transformed into tens of millions of tiny runes that rushed into Wu Qi's body. The small world inside Wu Qi's body suddenly disintegrated. Those runes rushed into the chaotic air mass formed by the disintegration of the world. A huge amount of energy flowed through his body, and soon, the disintegrated world formed again. However, the reformed world seemed to be very different from before. But Wu Qi couldn't figure out exactly what was different in a short time. Narrowing his eyes, Wu Qi carefully communicated with the new world inside his body. He frowned and pondered for a long time, then suddenly snapped his fingers. Along with a crisp sound, a tens of feet long hornless dragon appeared out of thin air, letting out a deep dragon roar. It floated obediently in front of Wu Qi, nodding and kowtowing to him. This is the embryo of a world creation. She's so lucky. Zhu Ling clicked his tongue and explained to Wu Qi what a world creation was. Just like how the immortals in Pangu world created their own interstitial worlds, the founders of the holy world, the spirit ancestors, the saints, and the 7 most powerful beings, all of them would create their own original world creation in their bodies. The world creation was the source of their power, the origin of the species they created. All kinds of cultivation methods in Pangu world were similar to those in the holy world. Therefore, interstitial worlds were similar to world creation. Just like the immortals in Pangu world, not all founders or spirit ancestors could create their own world creation. Only the extremely lucky ones with extremely high cultivation could create their own world creation and enjoy the endless benefits of world creation. After all, world creation was very different from interstitial worlds. Interstitial worlds were far more magical than interstitial worlds. Interstitial worlds could at most be regarded as portable caves. Even if they could accommodate living beings, they would need natural powers from the outside world to maintain their consumption. But world creation was different. A world creation was a world of its own. It could generate its own natural powers, and was a truly complete and independent world. Whether in terms of function or energy level, world creation was trillions of times more powerful than interstitial worlds. In the first small building that Wu Qi and the others entered, there was an embryo of world creation, and it took the initiative to merge with Wu Qi's interstitial world. This was indeed his luck. When the world creation was formed, Wu Qi suddenly found that his efficiency in mobilizing and using holy power was much higher. The Qi dragon just now was created by him out of thin air. Without much effort, the Qi dragon naturally appeared according to his will. It seemed that the world creation had created this Qi dragon for him, and he only needed to provide holy power to create it naturally. With a wave of his sleeve, the Qi dragon was sent into the world creation. Wu Qi looked at the people around him, and they slowly walked up the stairs in the corner of the room to the second floor. It was still the same 4 lampstands at the 4 corners. Other than that, there was only a thin cloud of smoke in the middle of the room. In the cloud of smoke, a translucent head was faintly discernible. The head, which seemed to be made of smoke, looked like a young girl of 16 or 18 years old. She was very beautiful, but the original beautiful face coupled with this strange shape made everyone's heart twitch when they saw her. "Oh, I finally see a living person." As soon as it saw Wu Qi and the others, the head laughed. "After waiting for so many years, I finally see people." Ah, a small world creation, a group of insignificant mortals. "Oh, these little girls are really beautiful, but it's a pity that they are a little weak." After talking nonsense, the head smiled and asked Wu Qi, "World creation, do you know where this place is?" Wu Qi nodded and said, "The 9 palaces star path outside the 7 holy palaces, isn't it?" The head smiled proudly and said, "Yes, it's part of the 9 palaces star path. The fact that you can come to me proves that you are lucky. Then, listen carefully, I will only say it once. If you miss anything, it will be your loss." Wu Qi and the others hurriedly looked at the head attentively, lest they miss a word. Seeing that the group of people were so nervous and serious, the head laughed triumphantly a few times, then asked, "There was a realm creation embryo below just now. It is one of the most important treasures that a great sage placed in the outer star path of the 9 palaces. Have you all seen the evolution above?" Wu Qi nodded and said in a deep voice, "That world creation embryo has been fused by me." The head tilted its head to look at Wu Qi and snorted coldly, "Nonsense, if it wasn't fused by you, do you think that a group of mortals can touch it?" The head mumbled a long string of words again, and then it said a very mysterious thing. It was nothing more than the law of life and death in the reincarnation of heaven and earth. Even the great divines could not escape it. Even if they transcended the mortal world and entered the divine realm, they could not escape death. The secrets of heaven were unpredictable, and they did not know where the slim chance of survival was. In short, her words were full of decadence, like a mental patient who kept repeating that she was going to die, she was going to die, she was going to die, and so on. Wu Qi and the others could not help but feel very tired. After talking for a full 24 hours, the head breathed a sigh of relief and asked Wu Qi and the others with a smile on his face, "Have you memorized everything?" Xia was so angry that her eyes turned green. She shouted sternly, "What's the use of this nonsense? Why do we have to write it down? Are you playing tricks on us?" Not only Xia, the others were so angry that their lips even twisted. For 24 hours, this head had been repeating nonsense like, "Destiny is determined by the divine realm. We can't go against the divine realm." She had said this for countless times, and it was so annoying. The head laughed out loud and said, "You can't blame me for this. These words were left by the great saint who created me. If you want to hear the real message, you have to listen to me carefully." It seems that you're all very patient." The others were so angry. This was a complete lie. After laughing for a long while, the head said while gasping for air, "All right, listen up, I only have one serious thing to say. If you don't want to die, try your best to surpass the 7 most powerful beings." Wu Qi was shocked. While he was pondering what this meant, the head had already transformed into a stream of light and drilled into the spot between his eyebrows. A cool stream of power merged with his soul. Wu Qi felt refreshed, and his senses were suddenly strengthened by many times. He felt that he had been reborn. In their shock, the group pondered over the skull's last sentence for a long time. In the end, they cautiously went up to the highest floor. On the third floor, a fist-sized spell symbol floated in the middle of the room. It was an exquisite, complicated spell symbol composed of thousands of layers of light patterns, filled with countless mysterious spell symbols. Chapter 1136. After leaving the building, the three-storied building quietly collapsed right in front of Wu Qi. The building transformed into streams of light and merged into Wu Qi's body, making his aura even more lively and agile. Although Wu Qi didn't know what benefits these streams of light could bring him, he couldn't find any disadvantages at the moment. Therefore, Wu Qi didn't care too much about it. The building and the square quietly disappeared. The group of people stood on another plank road paved with black volcanic rocks, taking a deep breath and looking into the distance. Behind them was a vast expanse of empty space, and the small courtyard several hundred kilometers away was clearly visible. However, there was a powerful flight restriction, so it was impossible for them to fly back to the courtyard. They could only continue walking along a path. However, at the end of this tens of thousands of miles long plank road paved with black volcanic rocks, was a hill floating above a star. The hill was no more than a few miles tall and had a circumference of tens of miles. At the top of the hill was a pagoda. That star was silvery white, covered with a thick layer of red flame. The raging flame silently rose up to the top of the hill, and the strong firepower passed through the hill and reached the pagoda. The entire pagoda was glowing with a bright red light, which made the countless jewels inlaid on the pagoda sparkle and dazzle everyone's eyes. Even from tens of thousands of miles away, one could still see the glint of those jewels, which showed how bright they were. However, the plank road paved with black volcanic rocks under their feet made those obviously precious jewels lose their allure. The plank road was made of several feet wide black volcanic rocks, dense and hard. However, in such hard volcanic rocks, there were countless living creatures frozen. There were poisonous snakes with 3 heads and 6 tails, beetles bearing their fangs, scorpions with wings on their backs, and countless other strange poisonous bugs. These poisonous bugs were inlaid in the rocks, looking like fossilized specimens. Through the translucent volcanic rocks, one could clearly see the slender bodies of these bugs and the stiff venom secreted from the corners of their mouths. However, when one used his spiritual power to examine them, one could find that these seemingly dead poisonous bugs still maintained a strong life force. They were only sleeping in the rocks and weren't really dead. Apart from the volcanic rock they were standing on, all the other rocks in front of them were frozen with one or more different kinds of poisonous insects. Aobuzan was the first one to step on a volcanic rock in front of them. Once he stepped on it, he heard a loud sizzling noise. Next, a dense black cloud rose from the volcanic rock, transformed into a mist cover, and wrapped the entire rock up. Looking through the mist, Aobuzan's body had suddenly shrunk to the size of a soybean. Suddenly, an inch-long venomous snake with 3 heads and 6 tails appeared in front of him. It was breathing poisonous smoke and fire, and it was opening its mouth wide, trying to swallow Aobuzan. The snake was very powerful. With just a curl of its long tail, it sent Aobuzan flying far away. The scales on Aobuzan's chest were smashed, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood from his 7 orifices. While cursing, he pulled out the soul-splitting spear and stabbed it violently at the snake. At the same time, he unleashed an evil supreme treasure of primal given to him by Wu Qi, which he had also refined dozens of times, the 9 female demon mothers' dazzling light banner. As soon as the banner was unleashed, a vast expanse of colorful mist enveloped the entire area. 9 fair-skinned and beautiful female demons were singing and dancing in the mist. Their bodies twisted and wriggled like a nimble snake, leaving behind countless illusions as they entangled the poisonous snake. At the same time, Aobuzan's soul-splitting spear transformed into bolts of lightning and darted towards the poisonous snake. The poisonous snake was enchanted by the illusions created by the banner. It stood still in a daze for quite a while. In that very moment, Aobuzan stabbed the poisonous snake thousands of times in a row. Fire sparkles rose from the snake's head, but not a single spear strike managed to penetrate its body. Wu Qi's expression changed. Through the dark mist, he could freely sense the power of this poisonous snake. This poisonous snake was not even as powerful as Ao Buzan. At most, it was equivalent to the peak level of Dao reasoning. Normally, not to mention the fact that Ao Buzan had been attacking the poisonous snake with all his strength, the 9 female demon mothers' dazzling light banner was incredibly powerful. After tens of times of refinement, once the banner was unleashed, even a Dao-fusing saint in Pangu world would suffer a great loss if he was careless. However, except for the fact that its mind was enchanted, nothing else happened to this poisonous snake. This didn't make sense, and it didn't make sense at all. While Wu Qi was still in shock, the poisonous snake suddenly realized what had happened. It raised its head and roared furiously towards the sky. Simultaneously, all 3 of its heads spurted out a black poisonous sand, which landed heavily on Ao Buzan's body. Ao Buzan howled in pain as he was sent flying far away. All of a sudden, his black scales began to rot and fall off, and black pustules emerged on his skin. The poisonous sand burst the pustules, splashing everywhere. Touched by the poisonous sand, Ao Buzan's skin immediately turned into rotten, black chunks of meat. Wu Qi was shocked. He desperately shook the map and shouted, "What's going on?" While roaring furiously, he exercised his divine ability and grabbed at the mist barrier. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not touch anything. It was as if the mist barrier and the volcanic rock were just illusions, and he could not grab them at all. Following Wu Qi's shout, the strange beast's head slowly emerged from the map. He smacked his lips and sighed, "Do you still remember that rune? If you want to save people, use that rune." That's all I know. It was you who brought me into the small building, that's how I got this information. I don't know anything else." That rune? Wu Qi thought of the rune that floated in the air on the 3rd floor of the small building. As soon as they stepped onto the 3rd floor, the rune turned into a beam of light and went into Wu Qi's body, not giving him any chance to react. Then a strong repulsive force drove them out of the small building. The small building and the square both turned into beams of light and went into Wu Qi's body. They were forced to stand on this pitch-black plank road. If he wanted to save Ao Buzan, he had to use that rune? Wu Qi immediately immersed all his mind into his spiritual ocean. Above his divine soul, the exquisite rune, which was formed by thousands of layers of light patterns, was slowly rotating around the heaven-refining cauldron. When Wu Qi's divine sense approached the rune, countless information slowly seeped into his divine soul, and a clear, powerful, and majestic voice quietly rang out in his spiritual ocean. Starting from the basic properties of the holy spiritual energy, the voice taught Wu Qi how to transform the holy spiritual energy into holy energy, how to store the holy energy in his body better, and how to use the holy energy to transform his divine soul and physical body, making them stronger. After that, the voice began to teach Wu Qi how to use the holy energy to analyze the composition of a living creature and analyze its weaknesses. According to the knowledge taught by the voice, all created creatures had weaknesses. There was no living creature in this world that was absolutely perfect. It could only be said that they were relatively flawless, but it was impossible for them to have no weaknesses. As long as one had a strong enough cultivation, rich experience, and knowledge, any living creature should have weaknesses. Countless information was quickly absorbed by his divine soul. Suddenly, Wu Qi opened his eyes. His primordial Dharma eyes shone with a dazzling light that looked like countless diamond dust reflecting the sunlight. The light was formed by countless tiny runes that could not be seen by the naked eye. The light pierced through the dark mist and landed on the 3-headed, 6-tailed poisonous python. Just now, Wu Qi had absorbed a huge amount of information and knowledge, but it was just a brief moment in the outside world. The poisonous python had poisoned Ao Buzan with its poisonous sand. Just as it was about to pounce on Ao Buzan and devour him, Wu Qi's gaze suddenly landed on its body. The poisonous python let out a shrill scream as if it had met its natural enemy. It curled up on the ground in fear, using its 6 tails to cover its head, shivering and not daring to move. In Wu Qi's eyes, the poisonous python had lost its shape, and was now just a clump of sticky black light. This clump of black light was extremely weak and small, and there were only 27 tiny runes inside it. These 27 runes were the source of the existence of this poisonous python. These 27 runes, which had different functions and properties, absorbed the natural energy and formed this poisonous python. The weakness of this poisonous python was the place where its 3 heads were connected. A flickering rune was the core of these 27 runes, and it was through this rune that all the power of the 27 runes were connected into one. This rune was located at the place where the 3 heads were connected. This was its most important energy core, and also its weakest spot. Aobuzin, attack the place where its 3 heads are connected. Attack with all your might. Wu Qi shouted in a deep voice. Aobuzin, whose body was oozing pus and was on the verge of death, cursed in a low voice. He staggered to his feet, then threw his head back and shouted, "If Lao Tzu dies, kill Immortal Jadebone and all the other girls and send them to accompany Lao Tzu. But Aobuzin, never wear a green hat." Wu Qi was stunned, and the eyes of the others all widened. Aobuzin roared something that almost made them vomit blood. Then he straightened the soul-splitting spear, transformed into a black bolt of lightning, and thrust it at the place where the 3 heads were connected. The soul-splitting spear easily pierced through the body of the poisonous python. The python squirmed violently, while beams of bright light kept flowing out of its body and flying into Aobuzin's body. Aobuzin roared in surprise, "Wonderful! Lao Tzu's body is strong, strong, too strong." In just a few breaths of time, the python had completely merged with Aobuzin's body. Aobuzin's aura suddenly grew several times stronger, and his cultivation base skyrocketed from the peak of the Tao-breaking realm. Both his magic power and the strength of his fleshly body had been strengthened several times. This. Wu Qi was so surprised that he could not say a word. Looking at the dissipating mist on the stone plank road, and at Aobuzin, who was happily stroking his body, which had grown much stronger. The strange beast's head emerged from the road map. Shaking his head and wagging his tail, he said, "When he killed this little bug just now, I suddenly learned something. If you can walk all the plank roads outside the 9 palaces, you will become a qualified founder. As for the group of mortals around you, if they can walk all the plank roads with you without dying, they may become founders." Wu Qi's eyes lit up. Could it be that the 9 palaces outside the 7 palaces were a training class for founders? Were the runes in his spiritual ocean the most basic training materials? Chapter 1137. On a flat land about 100 miles in circumference, Wu Qi was sitting cross-legged, his hands locked into an incantation gesture as he stared at a strange beast in front of him with a blazing gleam in his eyes. The beast looked like a qilin, with no scales on its body but poisonous thorns all over its body. It was about 100 feet long, with a pair of long crimson horns shrouded in poisonous smoke on its head. Its 4 hooves were treading on flaming clouds, and it moved as fast as lightning, making it difficult to guard against. Wu Qi was surrounded by a group of people, cautiously guarding Wu Qi, who was concentrating on analyzing the beast's weaknesses. Lord Xianxing was the only one who had transformed into his true form of a flood dragon, holding an illusion-breaking halberd in each of his 4 claws. His body flickered as he appeared in the void at any time, thrusting countless halberds at the strange beast from all directions. The strange beast ran like a bolt of lightning, dodging Lord Xianxing's attack by a hair's breadth. Lord Xianxing could not hurt the strange beast, but it did not have the chance to attack him either. The gleam in Wu Qi's eyes grew stronger, and a terrible pressure emanated from him that no one dared to look directly at him. This was the 15th plankway rock they had stepped into, and also the 15th strange beast they had encountered. Before this, Wu Qi had successfully analyzed the weaknesses of 14 strange beasts, and thoroughly understood the structure of their bodies and the secrets of runes. Every time he successfully analyzed the structure and weaknesses of these strange beasts, his divine soul would experience a certain change. The holy energy kept fusing with Wu Qi's divine soul, and the once chaotic divine soul was gradually fused with a faint silver gleam. It became denser and stronger, and even improved Wu Qi's divine sense and other aspects. Now, when Princess Zhonglu and the others faced Wu Qi, they had a vague feeling that he was not a human. His lofty and awe-inspiring majesty made them feel uneasy. The 7 sacred palaces left behind by the 7 most powerful saints of the saints' world. No one knew what the various arrangements in there would bring to the people. However, after killing the 14 exotic beasts, the people around Wu Qi had obtained a lot of benefits. Although they hadn't broken through, their strength was several times stronger than before. A loud boom rang out as Lord Xianxing, who was hiding in the void with the power of the illusion-breaking halberd, was struck by the horn of the strange beast. His armor shattered, and the horn pierced a full inch deep into his chest. The poison began to corrode his body, turning half of it crimson. Lord Xianxing's body trembled violently, and the blood flowing out of his 7 apertures suddenly burst into raging flames. Although the cultivation base of this Qilin-shaped strange beast was only at the level of a heaven immortal, with the help of the strange restrictive spells here, it was able to fight Lord Xianxing head-on. On top of that, its innate poison was so terrible that Lord Xianxing could not expel it from his body even with all his might. Wu Qi's eyes flashed as he stared at a certain part of the beast's lower body. In his eyes, the gigantic beast was no longer a physical beast, but a ball of burning red and sticky flames. Amidst the flames, there were 42 clusters of red runes flickering. These runes formed the shape of a strange beast. However, in the process of the runes connecting with each other, there was a weak spot on the beast's lower body near the penis, near the sachet that looked like the essence secreted by an elk. With a soft cry, Wu Qi contacted Lord Xianxing with his divine sense and told him the beast's weakness. The severely wounded Lord Xianxing let out a long roar and threw away the illusion-breaking halberd. With a sway of his body, he transformed into a strange-shaped flood dragon that was as thick as a fist and 1,000 feet long, shooting toward the strange beast with a stream of watery light. The strange beast had never dreamed of such a strange way of attack. Lord Xianxing had coiled a few times around its body, and the dragon's head was hanging right between its hind legs. Ao Buzan smacked his lips and spat out a mouthful of saliva. "You are so filthy. How could you use this trick?" With blood gushing out of his 7 orifices, Lord Xianxing could not care less about whether it was filthy or not. He opened his mouth and bit down on the sachet with 2 rows of glinting dragon teeth. With the sachet destroyed, the fist-sized sachet in front of the strange beast's yang root was immediately swallowed by Lord Xianxing. The beast's body trembled abruptly. The sachet was the vital point where all its energy essence converged, and it was also the main channel for its magic power to flow. With the sachet destroyed, all its blood essence immediately stopped flowing. The ferocious beast let out a miserable howl, then suddenly exploded into countless beams of red light that rushed into Lord Xianxing's body. Lord Xianxing threw his head back and let out a long roar. A series of explosive noises rang out from all the joints in his body, while waves of black and red water rushed out of his body. Then, he opened his mouth and sprayed out a jet of dragon flame toward the ground. A terrible heat spread in all directions, burning a shallow mark on the dark slate. Wu Qi could not help but be shocked. All the slates here were protected by some kind of restrictive spell that he could not identify, and even he could not destroy anything here. The power of Lord Xianxing's dragon flame was really terrible. However, Lord Xianxing seemed to have lost all his strength after spraying out the dragon flame. He swayed his body and transformed back into his human form, then tried to stretch his body. His cultivation base had improved a lot again, but the terrible aura he felt when he sprayed out the dragon flame just now had disappeared. The surrounding dark mist shattered, and everyone returned to their original form. Wu Qi rose to his feet and looked back at the empty void behind him, then at the small hill tens of thousands of miles in front of him, as well as the walkway made of hundreds of thousands of black volcanic rocks between him and the hill. He took a deep breath, pointed to the front, and said with a smile, "Let's keep going. Since they have arranged it this way, We'll just go along with them. Let's see how many benefits we can get after we finish walking the path outside the 9 palaces. After regulating their breathing for a while and adjusting their physical condition to the best, no one said a word and stepped onto a black rock in front of them at the same time. The walkway behind them turned into a stream of black light and shot into Wu Qi's body without making a sound. Wu Qi felt a cool sensation in his body again, and it was still the same strange feeling as if he had obtained something, but he could not tell what it was. A faint black mist came from all directions, turning into a black mist barrier that enveloped everyone. Frozen under the black, translucent volcanic rock was a green toad with 3 long legs, a skinny body, and 9 golden threads on its back. It was so green that it was frightening. It was so green that it looked like it could ooze green juice from its entire body. As soon as the mist barrier was formed, the ground flickered with a bright light, and then 6 toads, about 30 feet long, leaped out from the rocks. This time there were 6 of them. Wu Qi gave a soft cry, and Jin Jiao, Silver Horn, Jin Yu, and Silver Feather, together with 2 Xiaobai and Yuan Qing, a total of 6 people went up to greet them. The 6 toads let out strange cries as they sprayed out a sticky green mucus from their mouths, which turned into extremely tough threads that stuck together with each other in the wind. Together with the threads they spat out, the 6 toads formed a strange hexagon rune. Suddenly, the air around them began to stir rapidly. Green wind blades flew in all directions, and amidst harsh whistling noises, the wind blades gradually formed a large green screen of light that enveloped Jin Jiao and the others. Countless wind blades darted out of the rune and smashed down like a storm. Jin Jiao, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather returned to their original forms. The 6 dragon pythons of fire and ice joined their heads and tails to form a 4 quadrants heavenly defense formation, which kept spraying out waves of ice, wind, and fire to block the green wind blades. 2 Xiaobai swung the pair of heavy hammers, and relying on her excellent jumping ability, she transformed into a white beam of light and darted around, swinging her hammers at the 6 green toads in a flurry. Meanwhile, Yuan Qing returned to his original form of a mighty ape. He gripped the heavy cudgel with both hands and narrowed his eyes at the 6 green toads, who were gasping for breath. His eyes shone brightly as he vigilantly watched every move of the 6 toads, ready to react or give them a fatal blow at any moment. Wu Qi nodded silently. After being tempered by the tens of rocks, the people around him had begun to perform a set of reasonable teamwork skills. They could not find any benefits in this place, but when they returned to Panga World, the various teamwork skills they learned here would astonish everyone. Taking a deep breath, he used his divine will to communicate with the complicated rune hovering above his divine soul. A massive amount of information kept rushing into his divine soul, and a strong, scorching gleam shone from his eyes, enveloping all 6 green toads. A long while later, 6 shrill howls could be heard as a strong green light flew into the bodies of Jin Jiao and the others. The poisonous insects and beasts sealed in the volcanic rocks that formed the plank road were killed one after another, and the powers of the people around Wu Qi kept improving. As the volcanic rocks turned into black beams of light and flew into Wu Qi's body, Wu Qi sensed that his body was going through some magical changes. Working together, they moved forward step by step, and gradually came to the end of the tens of thousands of miles long plank road. Wu Qi didn't count how many dangers there were. Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia were almost killed by poisonous insects for quite a few times. Fortunately, Wu Qi discovered their weaknesses in time and saved them from death. Wu Qi tried his best to figure out the weaknesses of these poisonous insects and beasts, and finally he kept the people around him safe. Time was meaningless in this place. According to the normal speed of time, it should have taken them at least thousands of years to finish this plank road. However, in this complicated road outside the 9 palaces, time was stagnant. Time was meaningless, and they could only move forward step by step. Finally, they reached the hill floating above the star. They glanced at each other, then stepped onto the hill together. After killing a black human-shaped statue on the square outside the pagoda, they entered the pagoda at the top of the mountain. From there, Wu Qi obtained a bottle of spirit pills that could quickly recover his saint energy, a pharmacopoeia that recorded thousands of common herbs in the holy world, and a complicated talisman that was nearly twice as complicated as the previous one. Spirit pills were good stuff, and the pharmacopoeia was even more marvelous. It was a pharmacopoeia that was more profound than the pharmacopoeia that old man Yuan Ling knew in Wu Qi's previous life. It recorded thousands of common herbs, but old man Yuan Ling had only seen one in the chaotic world, and that herb was none other than the 9 resurrection grass that even the chaos fiend gods had once fought for. After leaving the hill, Wu Qi and the others stepped onto another plank road and continued moving forward. Chapter 1138. After they left the small hill, the plank road in front of them was like a huge bamboo leaf grass. The plank road was paved with pieces of jade that were as thin as paper and had a circumference of several tens of feet. Each piece of jade looked like the scales of a bamboo grass, extending from under the feet of the group to a lonely terrace nearly 10,000 miles away. Different from the black volcanic rock plank road in front, this plank road paved with jade pieces was engraved with all kinds of herbal patterns. Faint water vapor lingered on these herbal patterns, looking no different from living creatures. They knew that the restrictive spells here were extremely mysterious, and that even if there were any ambushes, they would not be able to see through them. Therefore, Wu Qi and the others adjusted their bodies to the best condition, then carefully stepped onto the first plank road. A green light flashed before their eyes, and just like the plank road in front of them, their bodies shrunk quickly. The tens of feet wide jade road now looked like a small piece of land that was thousands of miles wide. The large piece of land was laid flat, and was covered with all kinds of flowers and trees. A gentle breeze blew across their faces, and the aroma of herbs filled their nostrils. Wu Qi fixed his eyes on the woods, and found that many herbs were growing in strange shapes. They were all species that he had never seen in the chaotic world and Pangu world. But, according to the medicinal encyclopedia obtained from the pagoda just now, these herbs were the most common ones in the holy world. Before Wu Qi could see how many herbs there were, he heard a muffled moan. Tu Xiaobai rolled her eyes and fell to the ground. Countless tiny green blood vessels swelled on her fair face, making her beautiful face look especially scary and ferocious. Her heart was beating nearly 100 times faster than usual. Her heart was beating so fast that it sounded like hundreds of people were clapping their hands at the same time. Even from tens of meters away, one could hear it clearly. If Tu Xiaobai did not have the body of a demon immortal and the cultivation base of a Tao-breaking expert, the rapid heartbeats alone would be enough to kill her. But it was not the rapid heartbeat that killed her. What killed her was the poisonous gas that was gradually spreading in her body. Wu Qi sent his divine will into Tu Xiaobai's body, and he could clearly see a pale red poisonous gas spreading through her body. Wherever it went, her bodily functions would suddenly become thousands or even tens of thousands of times faster. It was as if a spark had been thrown into a barrel of gasoline, igniting a raging fire and burning away her life force. The endless life force that could support Tu Xiaobai's immortality was being consumed rapidly. According to Wu Qi's judgment, she could linger at death's door for 13 days at most before she was burned into a pile of ashes. Next to him, Princess Zhonglu also judged Tu Xiaobai's current situation. She hurriedly took out a few energy-replenishing spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth. But as soon as the spirit pills entered her mouth, they suddenly burst into flames, burning her lips and damaging her vitality. It did not do her any good at all. Yuan Qing, who had become a disciple of Wu Qi at the same time as Tu Xiaobai and had a deep friendship with him, knelt on the ground in panic and hugged Wu Qi's thigh. "Master, what's wrong with this rabbit demon? How did she become like this?" Wu Qi picked Yuan Qing up and threw him aside, then squatted next to Tu Xiaobai, pressed his finger between her brows, and injected a stream of his saint power into her. But as soon as the saint power entered her body, it burned rapidly. Her life force, which could last for 13 days, was rapidly reduced by the flame, and when Wu Qi realized something was wrong and withdrew the saint power, Tu Xiaobai could only last for 6 days at most. Wu Qi's expression changed. the 9 palaces road map floated up again, and the head of the strange beast flashed on the map. He licked his nose with his long tongue, shook his head, and said, "Once you set foot on this path, there's no turning back. Well, there are 360 spirit herbs in this forest, and 3 of them can be used to make white water powder to save this short-tailed rabbit demon. Hurry up and make the medicine, or we'll have to roast the rabbit for dinner." Yuan Qing flew into a rage when he heard that. He bared his teeth and swung the stick at the strange beast's head. The strange beast giggled, then turned into a beam of black light and disappeared into the map. Yuan Qing smashed the 9 palaces road map onto the ground with his staff. The seemingly soft ground exploded with a terrifying rebounding force, sending Yuan Qing and his family flying hundreds of miles away. They crashed headfirst into a tree and nearly broke their necks. "Stop it!" Wu Qi scolded, telling Yuan Qing to calm down. Then, he sat down beside Tu Xiaobai and quickly immersed his divine sense into his spiritual ocean, carefully probing the second rune he obtained from the pagoda. Once again, a large amount of information came out. The first rune taught Wu Qi the most basic method of analyzing the weaknesses of various living beings in the Holy Realm, while the second one taught Wu Qi how to analyze the medicinal properties of herbs and extract the required medicinal power from them to make pills. The method of alchemy in the Holy Realm was very different from that in Pangu world. When Wu Qi and the others concocted pills, they had to mix all kinds of herbs according to the proportion, put them into the furnace, and quench them with the flames of civil and military. The unnecessary medicinal properties were expelled, and the useful ones were extracted slowly, then combined into pills. Pills made in this way would inevitably contain impurities. Even the immortal pills made by beings like the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs still contained impurities, but the amount of impurities was negligible. However, if the immortal pills made by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs were made with various innate spiritual herbs, then even the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs could not completely remove the impurities in the innate spiritual herbs, and the impurities in the immortal pills would be a headache. However, alchemy in the Holy Realm was different. In the Holy Realm, the first step was to analyze the medicinal properties of the herbs, understand what part of the medicinal power of the herbs was needed, and then directly condense the medicinal power out of thin air and smelt it into a pill. As a result, all the great experts of the saints' world refined pills empty-handed. As long as they successfully refined any pill the first time, they would be able to refine it a second time, a third time in the most perfect way possible, and the effects of the pill would not change at all. The second rune taught Wu Qi the most basic method of analyzing the properties of medicinal ingredients, and the first one was the method of analyzing the properties of all 360 spirit herbs. At the same time, there was also a method of extracting the various medicinal powers that one needed from the herbs. However, this method of extracting medicinal properties was not easy, because other than some extremely rare pure and extreme spiritual herbs, the medicinal powers of the other herbs were heterogeneous. The useful medicinal powers were mixed with other medicinal properties. Other than the method of analyzing medicinal properties taught in the rune, the medicine encyclopedia obtained from the pagoda also had the recipe of the white water powder. However, the recipe of the white water powder only had the names of the 3 spiritual herbs needed, and it did not indicate what the 3 spiritual herbs looked like. The medicine encyclopedia only indicated that these 3 spiritual herbs all had a single cold water attribute, but they were slightly mixed with some impurities. If it were any other ordinary creator, when faced with Wu Qi's current problem, he would be worrying about how to find the 3 spirit herbs of cold water element from among the 360 spirit herbs, and how to extract the useful medicinal strength from them and fuse them into pills. However, there was a fundamental difference between Wu Qi and those ordinary founders. When he obtained the method to analyze the medicinal properties from the inscriptions and the formula for the white water powder from the medicine encyclopedia, he immediately used his divine sense to cover the surrounding forest and quickly found 360 different kinds of spirit herbs. With a thought, he uprooted 10 of the 360 spiritual herbs with his divine will. The chi-seeking divine ability found in Scroll of Stealing was activated, and the first thread of innate thievery energy mixed into his divine will. It quickly scanned through all 360 spiritual herbs, and among them, 49 were cold element spiritual herbs. After that, he easily picked out 3 cold element spiritual herbs, which contained an abundant amount of water element energy. With a flip of his palm, the thievery energy rushed into 30 spiritual herbs and quickly extracted the cold element energy from them. The tricolored cold element energy wheeled in Wu Qi's palm, then 3 fist-sized water droplets quickly fused into one, turning into a white water vapor that emanated pure water energy. This was the white water powder recorded in the medicine encyclopedia, a spirit medicine that could expel the fire poison in Tu Xiaobai's body. As soon as the spirit medicine was formed, it immediately turned into a cloud of dust that was thousands of times finer than the tip of a needle, and sprinkled onto Tu Xiaobai's body, making it look like a handful of medicinal powder had been sprinkled on her. Tu Xiaobai's body was burning hot, and the capillaries under her skin bulged like earthworms. She let out a moan, and the fire energy in her body quickly dissipated. Her scorching skin returned to its cool state, and her flushed face returned to its usual fair complexion. When the fire poison in Tu Xiaobai's body was completely cured, Yuan Qing, who was knocked flying away just now, came running back with a big stick in his hand. Seeing that Tu Xiaobai had fully recovered, Yuan Qing cried out in horror, "Master is indeed a peerless divine ability. How did she recover in such a short time?" The strange beast in the 9 Halls roadmap also revealed himself in horror. He stared at Wu Qi and cried out, "How is this possible? You are just the weakest founder, so how could you master such an exquisite technique of extraction so quickly?" "Strange, you are indeed very strange." Wu Qi did not say a word. His mind was completely immersed in the thread of thievery energy. The thievery energy, which was usually hidden in his body, was now hovering around the heaven-refining cauldron, absorbing the bright light emitted by the 2 runes. As the light fused into the cauldron, the thievery energy seemed to be fusing with Wu Qi in a real sense. Wu Qi seemed to have thought of something, but he dared not be sure. He shook his head, grabbed the 9 Palaces map, and said with a cold grin, "The next path is a test of my skill in pill concoction, isn't it? In other words, as long as we set foot on a plank path, the people around me will be in great danger?" Before his voice could fade away, the green light screen around them dissipated, and the flowers, plants, and trees all turned into streams of green light and entered Tu Xiaobai's body. Suddenly, Tu Xiaobai's eyes shone with a green light as she cried out in surprise, "How can I see so far away? My eyesight seems to be more than 10 times better than before." The strange beast smiled at the dumbfounded Wu Qi, then shook his head and said, "There are great risks, but there are also great benefits. In short, as long as you are a qualified founder, the people around you will not die. If you make a mistake, of course, they will die. But as long as you can concoct the right antidote every time, not only will they be fine, but they will also benefit greatly." The corner of Wu Qi's mouth twitched a little. This dark green plank road was really treacherous, and every step he took could take his life. Chapter 1139. After saving Tu Xiaobai, Wu Qi's group had no other way out, so they continued to move forward. They walked forward step by step and no one looked back. How many years had passed? Wu Qi didn't care about this question. Outside the 7 holy palace, time, space, and all the other rules that ordinary people were used to didn't exist or were distorted. They walked on the plank road step by step, breaking the deadly restrictions everywhere. They struggled on the edge of life and death, and they didn't have time to care about the things around them. Many times, Wu Qi was almost killed by the restrictions, and so were Princess Zhongli's group. They were either in some dangerous places, or there was an extremely powerful beast, or there was a terrifying poison that could kill people within 3 to 5 breaths. All kinds of restrictions emerged one after another. Wu Qi struggled and tried his best to study the symbols left by the restrictions. He broke them one by one to protect them. A long time ago, when Wu Qi's group had walked through hundreds of plank roads of different colors, they arrived in front of a grand palace. This palace was one of the 9 palaces outside the 7 Holy Palace. According to the strange beast in the map, if they could enter this palace and come out safely, Wu Qi's group would receive great benefits. Princess Zhang Li's group would have a chance to reach the incipient creation realm. However, after they got out of this palace, Wu Qi's group wouldn't have a chance to enter the 9 palaces outside the palace anymore. They would directly enter the 7 Holy Palace to find their own treasures. They would either get great benefits from the 7 Holy Palace and leave safely, or they would be buried in the 7 Holy Palace. But no matter what the result was, they would never be able to enter the 9 palaces again. Thus, Wu Qi resolutely gave up on entering this palace. He chose another plank road and continued to move forward. There were pavilions, courtyards, halls, and pagodas everywhere. At the end of the plank road, there would always be a delicate and magical building with 2 or 3 treasures left by the great experts in the holy world. However, none of them were sacred treasures. They were all drawings, books, and the like. Most of them were the symbols in Wu Qi's Sea of Consciousness, which were made up of thousands or even tens of thousands of layers of light patterns, which recorded a huge amount of data. How many symbols had they collected on the way? Wu Qi didn't bother to count. At first, he was still interested in counting how many symbols he had and how many benefits he had received. But when he counted to over 12,000 runes, there was one time when they were in a desperate situation, and all of them were nearly killed by a lava earthworm that leaped out from the lava. At that point, he no longer paid attention to these worldly possessions. He concentrated all of his energy and spirit to break all the restrictive spells along the way, trying his best to save the lives of all the people around him. In the end, did he collect 100,000 or 1,000,000 symbols that recorded countless information? He didn't know, and he couldn't be bothered to count. In any case, he only knew that more than half of the symbols had been integrated into his divine soul, because he had completely absorbed all the knowledge contained in those symbols. Step by step, his cultivation base of saint energy did not improve substantially, and the restrictive spells on the walkway were not something that could be broken with a strong cultivation base. His knowledge and experience became more and more plentiful. He had seen the most common rare beasts and poisonous herbs in the saint's world, as well as the various natural hazards, restrictions, and other strange things. His mind became more and more stable, his mind became more and more intelligent, and his soul became more and more condensed and powerful. His strength remained just like before, but his mind had completely exceeded the limits of his current strength. Princess Zhang Qixia and the others followed Wu Qi without a word of complaint. Along the way, they had narrowly escaped death, and many times they were almost wiped out, suffering countless hardships. But every time Wu Qi cracked a restrictive spell on one of the walkways, their strength would improve significantly. Although in the cognition of the strange beast and the spirit gatherer in the 9 palace diagram, Princess Zhang and the others were still mortals. Like ants in the sacred realm, their overall strength had reached the limit of mortals and could no longer be improved. Whether it was their physical body, spirit, magical power, divine ability, or even their knowledge and experience, they had reached the limit of the mortal. Wu Qi imparted the knowledge he obtained to them without reservation. Although because of their interest and ability to understand, Princess Zhang and the others only learned a part of the vast knowledge that Wu Qi imparted to them, they gained endless benefits from it. Quantitative change led to qualitative change. As long as they were given the slightest chance, they could be reborn and evolve from the mortal realm to the primordial creation realm. Finally, one day, Wu Qi and the others stepped out of the last dark purple plank road. There were no more plank roads in front of them, only countless stars hovering quietly in front of them. Wu Qi opened the map of 9 palaces. The countless tiny silver lights that crisscrossed around the 9 silver balls on the map had completely disappeared. They had gone through all the plank paths and there was not a single one left. The beast's head emerged from the map. He stared at Wu Qi as if he had seen a ghost. Do you know? You've walked through all the plank roads in the outer 9 palaces. You've done it. You've really done it. Wu Qi, who had no anger on his face, smiled and nodded. We've done it. The beast twitched his mouth, shook his head and sighed. How can there be freaks like you? How can you hold on until now? Many times you've almost been wiped out. Are you really not afraid of death? You bunch of freaks, what should I say to you? Wu Qi turned around and held Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia in his arms, whose faces had also become incomparably calm and resolute. Ao Buzan threw his head back and laughed triumphantly. What's so strange about that? Lao Tzu trusts this kid, so whatever he does, Lao Tzu will follow. Look, Lao Tzu didn't suffer a loss either. Let's see how many girls Lao Tzu can charm with his scales. Proudly, he exerted his power and covered Ao Buzan's body with a thick layer of purple golden dragon scales. The dazzling dragon scales were nearly transparent, glinting brilliantly like diamonds. They made Ao Buzan look like a god, and the sacred, solemn, and lofty feeling he gave off could really charm many female cultivators with a weak mind. Lord Xianxing was also laughing. With a sway of his body, a thick layer of silver-purple dragon scales immediately covered his body. They were the same brilliant dragon scales, but they were slightly less overbearing and barbaric than Ao Buzan's. The defensive strength of these dragon scales was amazing. In any case, even Lord Xianxing himself could not break their defense with the illusion-breaking halberd, which had been upgraded dozens of times. Smiling, Lord Xianxing said to Wu Qi, "We've agreed to advance and retreat together." The catfish flood dragon opened her big mouth and laughed, then said in a simple and honest manner, "Following Brother Wu Qi, you'll have meat to eat." Gold Horn, Silver Horn, Gold Feather, and Silver Feather did not say anything. They just looked at Wu Qi. Even if they had something to say, it was probably the same as catfish. Following Wu Qi would give them meat to eat, especially Gold Horn and Silver Horn. They had long believed that it was Wu Qi who had saved them from a horrible life of eating grass all day long. Only by following Wu Qi would they have meat to eat. Yuan Qing and Tu Xiaobai looked at Wu Qi with a silly smile. They clearly remembered that they were just some little fiends and devils on Pangu continent, facing the pursuit of the official army of Diyu and the threat of those powerful cultivators all day long. It was Wu Qi who took them as his disciples. It was Wu Qi who gave them their first flying swords and magical treasures. It was Wu Qi who gave them their first bottle of spirit pills. It was Wu Qi who provided them with security and dignity, which was more important than the safety of their lives. So, wherever Wu Qi went, they followed. It was that simple. Even though they almost died along the way, even though they struggled with life and death along the way, they had always followed him. As for Ninetails, who was lying next to them, drooling and gnawing on the thigh of an unknown beast, he did not think so much. When he broke out of his shell, he saw Wu Qi at first glance, and Wu Qi always gave him a lot of delicious food, so he followed Wu Qi wholeheartedly. It was as simple as that. Wu Qi glanced at the crowd with a smile, and suddenly felt that he was a failure as a human being. Except for Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia, who were his wives, Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing, who were his brothers, and Tu Xiaobai and Yuan Qing, who were his disciples, why were all these people a bunch of foodies? They all seemed to be following him with the thought that they would have meat to eat. What was this? He shook his head and gave a wry smile. His knowledge and experience were no longer the same as before. He picked up the map of the 9 palaces and sighed softly, "What a wonderful restrictive spell. The outer 9 palaces have always been in this map, right? Well, can anyone get this map except me?" The strange beast laughed. He shook his head and said, "There are thousands of such maps. Anyone who enters the 7th sacred palace will get one. But the first one to walk all the paths in the outer 9 palaces and obtain the complete inheritance of the founder will be able to open the outer 9 palaces." Casually throwing the map away, Wu Qi asked with a smile, "Has anyone else come in these days?" The map of the 9 palaces flew higher and higher as beams of silver light kept shooting out of it. The strange beast's laughter kept coming from all directions. "You've spent many years here, but in the chaos space, it's just 1 day and 1 night. In this 1 day and 1 night, The 7 sacred palaces have attracted more than 30,000 living beings from all over the chaos space through the 7,200 entrances. The strange beast sighed, then shook his head and said, "You are the only ones who have walked all the paths. Apart from you, there are only 43 people who are still alive now. All of them have chosen to enter the 7 sacred palaces. As for the outer 9 palaces, they do not have the confidence to walk all the way." 9 dazzling balls of silver light rushed out of the map, and from them, 9 palaces of different shapes, but all magnificent and simple, gradually emerged. These palaces were not very large, occupying only about 10,000 acres of land. They were arranged in 9 positions, hovering silently in front of the crowd. The map of the 9 palaces transformed into a large sheet of silver light and blended into the bodies of Wu Qi and the others. The strange beast's voice rang out quietly, "Go in and try your luck." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then took the lead and flew towards the nearest palace. The restrictive spell of flying had disappeared, so they could fly freely. While flying slowly, Wu Qi frowned and asked, "How did those people get the map? Could it be that they also have a founder like me?" The strange beast laughed strangely and said, "Well, they don't have a founder. But who said that I have to feed myself with the wine and meat I created to get the map? Different people have different tests. Don't you know that?" Wu Qi was speechless, shaking his head as he flew towards the palace. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.